Whenever you're ready, Mayor.
Yes, ready.
All right.
So good morning. This is the special meeting of the Ross Town Council, our annual strategic planning workshop, Tuesday, March 15, 2022. The first item is the roll call.
Councilmember Breckus
Aye.
and Councilmember Kircher,
Here.
Councilmember Cool,
Here.
Councilmember McMillan,
Yep, here.
and Mayor Robbins.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you. Second agenda. Has the agenda been posted?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. And the third item is public comment on the workshop. So the format for today is that public comments about any of the items on the workshop should be made now, and then the workshop order will be first, as it shows the housing element update, and then financial forecast, and then the 5-year capital improvement plan. So if you would like to speak, if you have comments about any of those items, anything on the workshop, please speak now. So are there any members of the public, Linda?
Yes,
would like to
I
speak?
just brought in Jeff Koblick.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Hello, Jeff.
Yeah, hi, Town Council. Thanks for having me. I'm with the RPOA, Ross Property Owners Association, and just wanted to say a couple words. We sent a proposal to you to sort of formalize our projects over the course of the next year. As most of you know, over the past 50, 60 years, we've been working with the town, doing various projects and cooperating. Towns contributed to some, we've contributed to some. And I think it was suggested that this year makes more sense to formalize it in the budget rather than do it on a project by project basis. And so I spoke with Krista and we went through a proposed budget, which I hope you'll find is fairly reasonable. And Ross Property Owners looks forward to working with you in the year ahead. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Okay.
And thank you for everything you do with RPOA.
It's our pleasure, and thank you guys for all you do for the town. It's way beyond anything we do. So,
Thanks.
Great.
And are there any other speakers?
I don't see any raised hands, Mayor.
All right, then we'll move on to item number 4, strategic workshop overview. Town Manager Krista Johnson.
Oh, good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank the mayor and council members for setting aside the time today to participate in this annual strategic planning session. I'm looking forward to our discussion and to receiving your input that will help guide the development of our fiscal year ending 23 budget. Before we continue and move on to housing, I'd just like to introduce the members of town staff who are participating today and who may be called upon to answer any questions that the council has that I'm not able to answer. We have our town clerk, Linda Lopez. We have our recreation manager, Gretchen Kastitz. We have our consulting accountant, Elizabeth Ford. And I just want to check with Linda Lopez. Is Elizabeth Ford on yet?
I don't see her yet.
Okay.
I think that she was going to skip the housing portion and
Yeah.
probably be on later.
Right, so she'll be joining us after that. We have, thank you, Linda. We have Police Chief Pata. We have our Public Works Director, Rich Simonich. We have our interim Planning and Building Director, David Woltering. And we have our planner, Matthew Weintraub, on the call. I think I've got all our staff team that are participating here today, and it's been a lot of work so far, but really, really great process, and it allows me to get to know, get even more familiar with the town operations. So our meeting program, we're going to start off with our orientation to the housing element update project. We have our brand new consultant on board, Andrew Hill with Dayet and Batia, who will be coming on right after me to give just an orientation to the council and any community members that are listening about our big project that's coming up now. Then we're going to move into, asking the council to review your town goals. I'd like to take a few minutes to celebrate our recent accomplishments. And I'd like to just take a minute to review some elements of our organizational capacity, then move into the 5-year financial forecast. Rich Simonich will take over and talk about our CIP, our capital improvement program, also known as our CIP. And then we'll look at discussing priority items that are non-capital related for the coming year, see what council's comments, input is, additions, et cetera, are on that, and then wrap it up. So that's kind of the format for today. So if we don't have any questions from the council at this time, I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Andrew Hill, if that's okay. Mayor?
Yes, just fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. Take it away, Andrew.
Okay, good morning again, everyone. Let me just share my screen. I've got a quick presentation. I'll put it in presentation mode. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Fantastic. So good morning again. My name is Andrew Hill. I'm with Diet and Bhatia, as Chris just said. And as we start up work on the housing element, we thought it would be a good opportunity to provide some background information to the council. So I put together this presentation to orient you to some of the housing element legal requirements, to define some of the key terms, and to walk you through some of the key steps in our approach to the project. There's a lot of information here. I've tried to condense and summarize. It should take about 25 minutes to get through the presentation, but then we've left a lot of time for questions and answers. So first off, what is a housing element? Well, the housing element is one of 8 state mandated elements of the general plan, along with land use and circulation, open space, conservation, safety, noise, and environmental justice. Essentially, it's the town's plan for accommodating local housing need. Different from other elements of the general plan, legally, the housing element must be updated every 8 years to plan for the coming cycle of 8 years. Also, the housing element is subject to a more detailed list of statutory requirements than other elements of the general plan. And unlike other elements of the general plan, the housing element needs to be reviewed and certified by the California Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. So for all these reasons, the housing element is usually published under a separate cover than the rest of the general plan. And that's the case for the town of Ross's housing element. One of the really core components of the housing element is the inventory of sites that are available for housing. Typically, this is presented in a table format indicating the location of the site, the size of the parcel, the applicable zoning designations, and a realistic capacity for the number of units that could be built on that property. And so this really means realistic capacity means the number of units that are likely to be built, not the maximum allowed in the zoning, but the number that's likely to be built based on past performance or other specific considerations of the site. The housing element also needs to include an assessment of local housing needs, an assessment of potential constraints or barriers to housing development, and any fair housing issues, by which that means any factors that might impede access to housing for disadvantaged groups like the disabled or senior citizens or ethnically or linguistic minorities in the community. So in view of all of that analysis, the housing element then needs to include a program of implementing actions to address those special housing needs, any local constraints, or any fair housing issues. The town of Ross's current housing element covers the 8-year period from 2015 through to 2023. And it's built around these 5 overarching goals. And each of these goals is supported by policies and implementing programs. So the goals are here up on the screen. Work together to achieve the town goals. This is about collaboration with other agencies and partners that have a hand in housing. Maintain and enhance existing housing, and blend well-designed new housing into existing neighborhoods. Use our land efficiently to increase the range of housing options and meet housing needs for all economic segments of the community. provide housing for special needs populations, and monitor program effectiveness and respond to housing needs. So as part of the process, we'll want to confirm that these goals are still valid and appropriate, or update them to reflect any input from the community and the council. As required, the town's current housing element does include that inventory of available land for housing. I've included a snapshot of it here, but it lists 19 individual sites with a collective capacity for 44 new homes. Most of those 19 sites are single-family residential sites, but there's a couple of key sites that in the current housing element are planned for higher density housing. One of them is at 37 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, which is a town-owned property, the Marin Art and Garden Center, the Branson School site, and a couple of smaller sites in the downtown area. Now, separate from those 19 sites, the current housing element also identifies the capacity for 90 accessory dwelling units, or second or caretaker units. And over the last 7 years, the town has seen construction of about, I think, 15 or 17 housing units. So there still is a fair amount of capacity when you consider, you know, the 44 new homes plus 90 accessory dwelling units in the current town zoning. So a buzzword that we hear a lot when we talk about housing elements is RHNA, and it means it stands for the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. Essentially, it is the total number of new housing units that the town must plan to accommodate in the upcoming 8-year cycle. RHNA is typically broken out into 4 different categories that represent different levels of affordability based on the county median income, or the area median income, the AMI. So households that make less than 50% of the area median income are in that very low income category, whereas households that make more than 120% of the area median income are considered above moderate. So where does RHNA come from? Well, it's the state that determines the overall housing need for each region of California based on population projections and other factors like the rate of vacancy, or the rate of overcrowding, or the rate of cost-burdened households in the region. They then assign a number to the region as a whole. And the regional planning agency, which in our case here in the Bay Area is ABAG, then allocates a housing target, that breaks up their number and allocates a housing target to each jurisdiction. And they consider, in developing targets, they consider factors such as access to jobs, or access to good schools, or healthy environmental conditions. ABAG, between October of 2019 and December of last year, ABAG developed its methodology for allocating RHNA numbers to individual jurisdictions, and refined it with community input over that period. And the final RHNA numbers were adopted in December of last year by the ABAG board. For the upcoming period, Ross has a total allocation of 111 units, including 34 units in that very low income category and 20 units in the lower income category. Now, as David mentioned in his presentation on Thursday, this number is a substantial increase over prior cycles. When, you know, in the previous cycle, Ross had a total of 18 units. Now, Ross is not alone in this. Throughout the state, the RHNA numbers have increased substantially in all communities. And this is largely due to 2 factors. The first is that the previous cycle, which covered the period from 2009 to 2023, had lower than normal RHNA allocations to reflect higher vacancy rates that occurred during the Great Recession. And then subsequently, for this upcoming cycle, there's new laws that are requiring that factors like overcrowding or the rate of housing burdened households be considered in the projections, and that leading to higher projections for most jurisdictions. So At any rate, 111 units is a substantial number for a town that has 880 existing units. But I think it's important to note here that the town is not required to build this housing. The requirement is that the town zone for sufficient capacity to meet RHNA at all income levels. Still, this will be a challenge, particularly because the state has introduced a slew of more stringent criteria for the eligibility of sites for those lower income RHNA categories. The sites must be, the lower income RHNA sites must all be larger than a half acre, because that helps with the financial feasibility of housing development. They need to be close to transit, and they need to be served by water and sewer utilities. Additionally, those lower income sites need to be located outside of natural hazard risk areas like flood zones or wildfire risk zones or seismic risk. So while we saw the current inventory does seem to have a fair bit of capacity, we're still going to need to take a thoughtful strategy for accommodating the RHNA in view of these various constraints. But there are some new state laws that have come online that offer opportunities for ROS. These laws seek to facilitate the production of smaller scale housing, like accessory dwelling units that may be affordable, more affordable due to their smaller size, and that's called affordable by design. So these could be appropriate for home help workers, perhaps elderly parents, or even young adults starting their careers, and they can help the town to satisfy its lower income RHNA categories. We'll need to carefully look at recent trends in ADU production, and also forecast the potential for units that could be built pursuant to SB 9 lot splits. And SB 9 is a new law that's come into effect at the state level that allows for single family property owners to split their lot and construct up to 2 new units. So collectively, these new laws offer a potential avenue for ROS to satisfy a large part of its RHNA with smaller scale units, and that allows the community to satisfy those legal requirements, but do it in a way that respects aspects of community character that residents of ROS value so highly. So accommodating RHNA will be an important part of our approach, but I'd like to touch on some other aspects of our approach as well. One of the first things that we're going to do is conduct a range of background analysis. As I mentioned previously, there's a number of legal requirements for analysis that needs to be done. For example, we'll review census data to identify any special needs groups in the community, be they disabled or seniors, for example. We'll also audit the zoning code and conduct interviews with real estate professionals or housing developers to assess any governmental or non-governmental constraints to housing. And we'll analyze the access to fair housing consistent with state requirements. We'll do all of that. We'll produce a series of reports that will inform the needs of the community, and important for this will be conducting early on a series of focus group discussions with property owners or real estate developers, members of the council too. These small group discussions will allow for really a candid discussion about issues and opportunities, to hear from key stakeholders about your perspective on issues and opportunities. And that'll really help us to make sure that the strategies we put forward are realistic and feasible and are appropriate for ROS. The results of this background analysis will also be summarized and presented to the community. Community engagement will be an important part of the process, and we've put together an approach that seeks to inform, engage, and solicit input from a broad range of community members throughout the process. We want to take opportunities to raise awareness of the housing element requirements, to use input received from the community to help shape strategies and ensure that the content of the housing element reflects community values and priorities. And we want to provide multiple opportunities for community review and refinement. We'll do this incrementally throughout the process. So then when we have a draft element, it's not going to be the first time the community is seeing it. They will have had multiple opportunities to become familiar with the requirements and the content and provide feedback before we get there. And by doing that, we hope that we'll smooth the process to get to the goal. Our engagement methods include a wide variety of different tactics. We're proposing to do 3 townwide mailers at key junctures in the process. So initially we want to produce a townwide mailer to let people know that the process has started and to inform them of opportunities to get involved. We're also planning to do pop-up outreach, for example, at the post office or maybe at events around the community. So we meet people where they are in their daily lives, give them some information on the project and maybe a quick opportunity to provide some input. We've also planned on 6 stakeholder group presentations, for example, to the Ross Homeowners Association or other community groups. We can go and make a presentation and let them know about the process and again, about opportunities to get involved and provide input. We're planning on 3 community open house meetings, again, at key junctures in the process. An online survey when the draft housing element is ready. We'll create an online survey that allows people to understand what's in the draft, provide some feedback. And that's an opportunity for people who might not have the time or the availability to come to one of the open house meetings. They can also, from the comfort of their living room, provide input on a schedule that's convenient for them. And then again, we've programmed 3 meetings with the town council to incrementally report on progress and to vet solutions along the way. Throughout the process, we'll provide information for town staff to post on the website or through social media channels as well. The 3 open house meetings that we're planning, let me talk a little bit about those. The first one we're planning to hold in June, and the objective here would be to provide the community with some background information on the legal requirements, some local conditions, the result of that background analysis that I mentioned, and then to solicit some feedback. These would be in an open house format with stations on different topics that people could circulate to, ask some questions, provide a little feedback. The second open house would be probably in the September timeframe. This would be an opportunity for people to provide input on the draft housing element before we send it to the state for review. And then the third open house would likely be in February of next year, and that would be an opportunity to present any updates or edits to the housing element that come out of the HCD review process. Each of these community meetings would be followed by a town council meeting where we would present a summary of the community feedback for decision makers. Another aspect of the project, the update to the housing element triggers a statutory requirement to update the safety element. New laws that have come online since the general plan and the last housing element were adopted require that newer data on environmental hazards be incorporated into the document, and also that some additional analysis of emergency access be done. The town of Ross has a local hazard mitigation plan for the period of 2018 to 2023. It was prepared as part of the county-wide local hazard mitigation planning effort. And it includes a lot of the new required information. So we can reference that and incorporate it into the safety element of the town's general plan. There is a new requirement that with the update to the housing element, we analyze emergency access or evacuation route capacity. And so what we're proposing to do is to use graphic information systems, GIS-based mapping software to analyze evacuation routes and identify the need for any new policies. And by doing that, we'll satisfy the requirements for the safety element. Environmental review is also required because the housing element will ultimately be adopted by a discretionary act of council. We'll need to conduct environmental review to satisfy the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. To do that, we'll prepare a robust initial study to identify any potentially significant impacts that could come from the housing element, from implementing the housing element update. And we'll use that initial study to focus an EIR only on those topics for which there may be a significant impact. So that means in the initial study, we'll look at all of the required resource categories and analyze them for potential impacts. However, we think that it's only likely that a handful of them may result in a significant impact that would require mitigation. And so through the initial study process, we'll identify what those resource categories are, and then an EIR will focus in on those, providing a deeper dive into those issues and identifying potential mitigations that could reduce or avoid those impacts. This is a snapshot of the overall process flow for environmental review. You can see we would start with that initial study that looks at all of the potential resource categories and identifies potentially significant impacts. That would be circulated to community members and to interested public agencies as part of a notice of preparation, letting them know that that an EIR is being prepared. That would trigger the need for a scoping period. So that's a 30-day period that's required by law that gives people the opportunity to say, to let us know about potential environmental impacts and solutions that could address them. We'll take on board that feedback and prepare the draft EIR. That would be then released for public review for a mandated 45-day period. During that time, people would have the opportunity to make comments in writing, and so we would respond to all comments and prepare the final EIR. And that final EIR document would be publicly available during hearings before the town council. Let me take a moment now to talk about the overall project timeline. Overall, our approach to the project is based on 4 key phases. It'll be completed in these 4 distinct phases, and each phase has opportunities for community input. The goal would be to complete the process by April 15th. So the startup period is where we would do this background research and the initial community outreach. The draft plan preparation would also involve the first open house. The public review is where we would do the environmental review and also have the revised housing element reflecting any edits that HCD would like to request available to the public, and then we move into formal adoption hearings. And so there are a couple of milestones, sort of required milestones that we need to be conscious of. Before we send the draft housing element to HCD for review, we're required to make that draft available to community members for comments for a period of 30 days. And so that is programmed into the schedule. The state law gives HCD a period of 90 days for their review of the housing element. As I mentioned, the scoping period for the EIR is defined at 30 days, and public review of the draft EIR is 45 days. The statutory deadline for adopting the housing element is January 15th, 2023. But as David mentioned on Thursday, there is a grace period of 120 days, which would extend that timeframe for adoption to May 15th. So in view of all those various milestones, we've put together this schedule that accommodates those various defined periods of public input and review. You can see those shown in the hatching here. But overall, this schedule shows us completing the project within a period of about 12 months. And that would allow for some buffer before the end of the 120-day grace period. We've tried to, as you can see here, program community input early and often throughout the process. And we've also looked at ways to streamline this schedule. For example, during that 90-day review period, we'd use that period while HCD is reviewing the draft document to complete the environmental review. So these things don't have to happen sequentially, they can happen in parallel in order to streamline that process and make sure that we get it completed within the required time frame. So that is a lot of information, I know, but maybe I will pause there and see if you have any questions. I'm happy to take those.
Thank you very much. That was a really helpful overview. I have one question to start off, and that is, if there are ADUs that are being considered now or SB9 lot splits that are being considered now, can those count towards our quota of 111?
Yes, it depends on the timing. So there is a planning period that is about 4 to 6 months before the start of the next cycle. If those units receive their certificate of occupancy within that planning period of 4 to 6 months before January 15th, yes, we can count them towards the 111 units.
Thank you. I wonder if you could stop sharing your screen and then I'll have the ability to see the entire group.
Yes.
But it looks like Councilmember Breckus and then Councilmember Cool.
Thank you. I was wondering, first off, have you seen councils take general fund money to try and help with some of these strategies, i.e. incentivizing ADUs? I heard, that someone in Napa or one of the, I don't know if it's Napa or Sonoma, somewhere that way, they have done that. And, it occurs to me that, I floated this idea to various residents and they thought it sounded like a good idea that if we, take 10,000 and give it to people who put ADUs in their yard, 15 if you do a low income housing, that, maybe we could increase density without really changing the character of the community and having people, be upset that they're going to be living next to a tower or something.
Right.
And I even wonder about whether it's possible. I mean, the prefab construction is just getting really great. I've worked on 2 very high-end prefab projects that are coming into various areas. And I wonder if we couldn't consider, having our ADU group, maybe pitch it with some of the architects who have already worked on prefabs, look at 3 or 4 that are really solid choices for the community. And, then it makes the approval of those easier. It makes people understand, okay, this is exactly how you set up a landing for a prefab, because a lot of people that I talked to said they would be really interested, but they couldn't give the time or energy to, finding an architect, designing it, finding a contractor. And I just wondered if we made it a lot easier with some, initial work on our end to look at that kind of option. If that wouldn't be a way not just to plan for them, but to in fact get them built and added.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. There are, I know of a number of jurisdictions that have done sort of what they call permit ready ADUs. So as you're suggesting, they've got a stock set of plans that are approved. And anyone who wants to build an ADU can just go in and know that if they choose this design and this package, it's going to satisfy all the local requirements. And that really takes a lot of the uncertainty out of the process and makes it easier for someone who wants to build an ADU. So that's certainly something we can explore. Your suggestion about potentially offering incentives too, another solution that we could certainly explore to help incentivize it. And I think that HCD would look very favorably at both of those approaches. So that can be
It
helpful.
doesn't constitute like, we're not supposed to have a gift of public funds, right? But that wouldn't be seen as that. Is that correct?
I don't think so. I'm not the town attorney, so I couldn't categorically say, but I have seen incentives, community, and if that's HCD and the state's ultimate goal is to increase the supply of housing, right? And if you're assisting with that, I would assume that that's a favorable approach because it
Okay.
helps achieve the goal.
Great. Councilmember Cool.
Two questions. Well, one's a question, one's a request. Who certifies the EIR?
You do, the town council does.
And the request is, could we get a copy of that proposed schedule so we know where we're going?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember McMillan.
Yeah, I would actually like a copy of your whole PowerPoint. I was trying to take notes. It was really, really helpful. Thank you. So I have a suggestion about the emergency access evacuation. There's already been a ton of stuff done by the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority on evacuation, and Krista can put you in touch with the executive officer of the MWPA. His name is Mark Brown. There's no reason for you to reinvent the wheel on that, and hopefully he's developing similar packages for all the jurisdictions that are having to undergo this. And then Thursday night, when you were briefly introducing this, I asked about whether we could somehow utilize credits from other jurisdictions and how that would work. So I would want to make sure that that is something that is being fully explored. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Kircher.
Just a couple of, maybe these are more like comments, but things that may be appropriate to raise at this point. First of all, I think as far as the council is concerned, but also in these subsequent events that are being planned, I think it's really important that we communicate clearly to the town that this is not a matter of whether. This is something we're required to do by state law. It's a matter of how. And the more input and help we can get, the better. And I've learned serving on the council that just because you announce something doesn't mean everybody's understanding that. It takes a while for these messages to be disseminated to the community. And I think on some of these other issues, people really didn't understand the framing very well. For example, our most recent Branson issue. I think there was some misunderstanding of of the meaning of the last Measure F, basically, and so forth. So if we could start off on the right foot here with letting everybody know this is something we have to do, we have a deadline, it's not optional, let's do it the right way. Secondly, on the safety planning, I agree, let's coordinate with what the fire district is doing. I'd also like to see some attention at some point to the main evacuation routes, Sir Francis Drake and Lagunitas. There's some issues there that I don't see much discussion of, like liquefaction, these leaning utility poles, some of which are just leaning across or toward Sir Francis Drake, and might be an impediment to an evacuation during an earthquake or something like that. And then finally, this idea of incentivizing, something that occurred to me. Mayor Robbins mentioned the issue of, is there a gift of public funds? Of course, we rely on our town council, but Another option is to simply waive some of the fees, which having just constructed an ADU, I can tell you those fees really add up. That is something I think the town could do. Anyway, as I said, more comments than questions.
Thank you. Councilmember McMillan.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I totally agree with your points about characterizing the issue. I don't think we characterized the issue, however, in our most recent adventure. But Andrew, I was thinking it might be nice not only to say that these things are mandatory, but what happens if we just say, well, we're not going to do this? What are the consequences? What are the penalties to the town? I think it's important for people to understand that they have a pretty big stick.
Yeah.
Are there other questions? Well, I think, Andrew, this was a really helpful, sorry, Councilmember Breckus.
I was just going to ask Bill, could you tell me, do you have an idea of what the cost was to build the ADU, like the fines, I mean, the fees, and then I'm guessing you didn't go prefab, you did something custom. Can you give us an idea of what that?
Yeah, well, yes, well, just the Ross fees, there was initially a planning fee and a couple of billings, and then the building permit fee. And for, I think they were about $12,000. Now this is, and of course there were also fees from the water district, the sanitary district, the fire district. I mean, all these inspections and so forth, but the ones Ross has control over, about $12,000 for a 165-foot ADU conversion that was already a room. It was a room under the garage. So, you know, that's a small ADU. Some of these ADUs are quite a bit bigger. And so this could be quite an incentive if we could find out, come up with a fair way to do that, as opposed to just paying cash to somebody out of the general fund. Again, Ben would be the final word on that, but that may be a problem.
Councilmember McMillan.
I have heard from people that there are several ADUs that are not currently authorized. And so maybe there's a way to have a moratorium and grandfather in a lot of existing things without penalties to help us meet that number. I can't give you any leads, however.
That sounds like a great strategy. Amnesty, that sounds ideal. Any other comments or suggestions? Well, Andrew, thank you. This was really helpful for this kickoff. And then just tell me or tell us the next step is what? Like, when will what is the next step for us or for the community, and when does that happen?
Well, I think the next step for the community would be that townwide mailer to kick things off and explain the process, and that would probably be in April. We'd have it ready to formally kick off. In terms of next steps for the consultant team, we've already got started sort of collecting data. It takes some time to collect the data, but one of the most important things I think will be to look at your current inventory of sites and figure out which ones are still in play and that kind of thing. So the first townwide event will be the mailer, I guess, and then in June the first big event will be that first open house where we're presenting the findings of the background research and some preliminary ideas for input.
Okay, and so that's a public meeting, but council members can attend as members of the public. It won't be a council meeting.
Correct.
Okay, but then it will be followed by a council meeting. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Fine. Councilmember Breckus.
Well, I'm just wondering about this next meeting, because it sounds like it'll be presented as essentially the town's ideas for accomplishing this. And I guess my concern is, we will not have said one word about that plan. And if it comes forth and it looks like it came from us, but really it didn't come from us because we don't even know what it's going to say, then I just wonder if that, you know, is there a way to build a council meeting in between there so we can give feedback? Because I could just see, kind of like the Ross Commons plan, that we could end up with a plan that everyone's like, those dumb council members, what are they thinking? And then it's on us, but we haven't even vetted it. We haven't said a word, and probably we can't say a word at that meeting. So I'm just wondering, I mean, I kind of know what I would like to see in a housing plan already, and it's really what I just laid out. And I feel like if you know, I'm not saying that there can be some more density housing, and some of the ones that are in our prior plan are probably somewhat appropriate, but I'm just wondering, you know, if you've come forth, for example, with a tower over at the St. Anselm's parking lot that just became the destination for all the Branson increase students, I could see that looking like people just say, these people are, you know, tone deaf or not really thinking here. And I'm wondering, do some people have, before the consultants come forth with a plan, do they have a second meeting of council members so we can get ahead of it and say, you know, these things don't make sense? Or what do you think about that?
I should just clarify. Number one, there is, if we go back to the schedule, and I can share this with you in the presentation, we are planning a town council meeting prior to that first open house. The town council meeting would be in April, and that's when we would present some to you all. We present some of these preliminary findings on the background research. So there's that. And then the first open house meeting with the community in June is not to present like a draft of the housing element at all. It's really to present sort of existing conditions and trends to people. So I hope that helps to sort of frame things a little better. Council will have had a meeting on the existing conditions to review and provide comments before we go to the town to present those. I hope that helps.
It does. Can I just ask another follow-up question? Normally, when we have a planning project within 500 feet of someone's home, we give notice, you know, with a specific mailer. And, you know, I just am wondering what kind of outreach we can do for that meeting, and whether it would be appropriate to do something like that, or even something that doesn't look so formish, to really get people's attention. I know that's expensive, but I just really hate the idea of, you know, getting people not engaged and understanding how impactful this is going to be to everyone's property.
Yeah, I think that's the intention of those townwide mailers, that every address in the community will get one, and they wouldn't be sort of a form letter. We'd try and make it like a postcard, you know, that sort of gets attention and conveys, you know, the importance of this project.
Okay.
Town planner, Mr. Waltering.
Thank you, Mayor. Andrew, I think it would be helpful if you would describe to the council members the framing. Council members indicated a strong concern about making sure that the legal requirements are presented in terms of what is the mandate, what are the options, framing this to the community, to the local citizens. So you had indicated earlier in terms of the number of meetings that you had laid out, that there would be that opportunity for kind of framing this. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think talking about these townwide mailers, that our first sort of opening with the community is that opportunity to invite people to participate in the process, but also to explain what it is. So we can do that with the townwide mailer. I mentioned also that we be providing materials for town staff to post on the website, you know, that provide more detail than you can include in a postcard or a handout. So the postcard, for example, could, have some summary information and then a link to the website where you can find more information. But then also, as I mentioned, on that list of outreach strategies, we're planning to do pop-up outreach, for example, at the post office or other events around town. We can be there with, maybe a poster board and have sort of a stop and chat station where we can provide some information, answer questions, or get some input. So I think those are some important initial opportunities to sort of explain what this project is, and to, as you say, David, frame the purpose and the need, as well as the timeline and the approach.
Another, as you're sending out mailers, another thing to consider is you could put the same mailer on the town's email list. I think that would be a good way to, sort of, it goes to every mailbox, but it can also just be sent out on the town's email list. And I think that would reach a lot of people. So that way we're really reaching out as best we can. Councilmember McMillan.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to say on the bottom of that postcard, if you want, future information, sign up for to be included on the Ross email list. And that way we can also build. I think our email list is pretty large, but there's always opportunity to increase it.
Right. And the mail goes to every single post office box. So everyone in town will get the mailer. And that, that's a great way to increase the outreach on the email list. Councilmember Breckus.
I was just going to say, I almost would love to see that mailer and have it, maybe approved by the mayor and vice mayor before it goes out, just in case they have additional ideas about it.
That's a good idea because, having several people look at these things always helps you get a better product in the end, to either edit or add things to make it better. Any other questions or comments?
Then we can blame you if we don't like it.
Well, my tenure, I hope will continue past July, but not as mayor, so it won't even be me all the time. So, so it's going to be, it'll be Beach who's going to be the grammarian or whatever. Okay, anyway, I think that's good. This has been a really helpful kickoff, and thank you so much, Andrew. Any final questions or comments before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, Andrew, thank you very much.
Okay.
At some point during the workshop, we'll take a break, but I think maybe we'll take a break around 11. It's not even 9 and not even 10. Seems a little early for a break. So let's keep going. So the next item is item number 5. Item number 6, the 5-year financial forecast.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I just take a moment. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. And I wanted to check with our town clerk if our consulting accountant, Elizabeth Ford, is, I believe she's a participant, if you've moved her over to a panel.
I think she's in there, but I can't move her with the screen share up.
Okay, should I unshare real quick so she can be a part?
Yeah, if you think she needs to be in on this, yes.
Yeah, and yeah, I'd like her to be part of this. Okay, I'm going to stop share. I'm back.
Okay.
Let's move Liz over. And here she is. Welcome, Liz. Okay, and I'm going to start sharing the screen again. Okay. Let's see. Okay, we've got our workshop. Meeting program, we already went through. Excellent orientation. Okay, now we're to town goals. So I understand that about 6 years ago, the council developed 6 town goals. And these goals help to guide staff in serving the town and in the review and planning of new projects. And then I understand that, I believe it was last year, when the council was reviewing the goals, they added a word fairness to the first goal. They added the 7th goal, promote environmental stewardship, and did a little bit of reordering. So if we'd like to, if the council could please take a moment to review these goals, and I'm happy to read them out loud if you'd like. The first is provide transparency, consistency, and fairness in government. The second is sustain financial responsibility and stability. Third is enhance effectiveness and efficiency of the delivery of services. The fourth is maintain a safe community and improve emergency preparedness. 5, foster and strengthen community involvement. 6 is maintain and improve infrastructure and facilities. And the 7th, promote environmental stewardship. If the council has any changes or additions or wants to talk about it, now's the time to do so.
To me, these are excellent, and I don't see any particular reason to add or edit. That's my take on these. Julie, you could just speak up, anybody. So Julie, go
Oh,
ahead.
okay, cool. We don't need to have any kind of goal about our housing element, do we? Is that encompassed in other goals like infrastructure or, I don't know. You know what? I retract that statement. Just ignore it.
I think if anyone wants to speak up, they should just speak up, because with the screen share, I don't see everyone's face. So go right ahead and just speak up if you have any comments. All right, I think Krista, we're good to keep going.
Hey, wow, good work on that one. Okay. The next is I wanted to take just a few minutes to really celebrate recent accomplishments. And I've put together a list with the assistance of our staff team, and many of these items, or most of these items, were, were really led, inspired by the town council, supported by the town council with their review, your review, and your action on them. And I'll just take a few minutes, if that's okay, to go through them. And just take a moment to celebrate it, because the year hasn't even gone by. We still have quite a few months of the fiscal year left, and a lot has been accomplished. And so I think first and foremost is a very productive town council, and that is a big accomplishment and something to be celebrated. And I think that just since I've been here in November, I've seen the productivity and the hard work of the council, especially with your recent special meetings and your ability to discuss and make decisions and in a respectful manner. And so that's a great thing. So congratulations. The second is to continue the COVID response and the recovery from the pandemic. And just some examples of that is just how the town organization and the council and the ADR group were willing to continue operations, and our staff was able to continue to meet its turnaround times in terms of application processing. I think was so important these last couple of years and continuing through this last year. You continue to hold meetings on Zoom. Your town clerk was able to continue to do this and do the minutes and still have the outreach. The town organization complied with all the Marin County health orders, which was certainly really important. Most recently, vaccination requirements for public safety employees. You continue to communicate with the public in a robust manner. You continue to assist the business community. You resumed the town dinner, which I understand was very successful last fall, and you continue to provide support to RPOA for several other events last year. Recreation classes increased and are becoming almost full, back to even maybe more robust than they were before the pandemic. So all of that COVID response and recovery is going to continue, but I think that is a big accomplishment from the current fiscal year. A financially healthy and proactive budget. For example, your facilities fund has now, you've saved $7 million towards new facilities. And that is something that is a very substantial accomplishment. You transitioned to several key staff, including me, and your police chief started just under a year ago. And just recently, we brought on board David Woltering as the interim planning building and director. He's doing a fantastic job, and we are recruiting to fill that position and several positions in our police department. So those transitions have been a good accomplishment thus far, and we'll have a lot to do the coming year. You updated your financial policies last year. I believe it was in August. Those that, and I believe the personnel policies were also updated as well. And so big kudos to my predecessor, Joe Chin, and Linda Lopez, and the rest of the staff team, because those are the kinds of things that oftentimes languish because they're not right in front of us all the time. And so that being able to come on board and having those already revised in place is a big help. You made progress, as Andrew Hill was just describing, not only in your 5th housing cycle element, where the town has been able to meet its RHNA allocations from the 5th cycle, and now you're already starting to work on your 6th. So a little bit, we're going to be playing a catch up, but already I think we've got a good plan to get this done by the required deadline. EV charging stations, it's Rich Simonich let me know that we are starting, they're starting to work on putting them in at the post office parking lot today. So that's a good accomplishment. Branson CUP amendment, many meetings, a lot done, and you got closure on that item. You updated the emergency operations plan last year. That is another example of things that oftentimes are hard to get to because we're so busy handling what's in front of us day to day. So having that updated is a good achievement from this current year. You've increased wildfire prevention strategies, or implemented them. You've taken some emergency response measures. So for example, even just whether it's fixing the siren and increasing education, those are all accomplishments. A lot of work to do still, for sure, but some good accomplishments. The town's response to the October flood event, that was one of the first things that was discussed when I got here, and it seemed like it was a good response by town staff and the community. You completed your Ross Common Landscaping Master Plan last fall. The council came to a decision on the fire station, and you also amended the town's the joint powers agreement with Ross Valley Fire Department just at your last meeting. So significant accomplishment. In the area of organics recycling, that has been required by the state, Senate Bill 1383. The planning and building staff brought forward and the council approved the required ordinance. And then we also went ahead and amended the town's franchise agreement with our hauler, Marin Sanitary. So another accomplishment. We have staff who have supported the age-friendly task force throughout the year, in particular Police Chief Pata and our recreation manager, Gretchen Castets. Traffic education and enforcement has continued to be emphasized by our police department personnel. and increased outreach and community engagement, especially with Police Chief Pata coming on board and really enhancing with a whole list of community engagement activities that he has been involved in. Partnerships with the Ross School. I know that, again, Police Chief Pata has done quite a few things with the school, and Gretchen and our staff continue partnering with the school. And then most recently at your last council meeting with the partnership to open up the school restrooms for intermittent community use. So those are a few things that just popped to mind, and I'm certainly not a complete list. And I know a lot could be said about them, but we don't have that much time this morning. But I wanted to take the time if the council members had any others you'd like to, that comes to mind, I'd like to add them to our list and celebrate them, acknowledge them.
Councilmember McMillan.
I think that's a great list. And I really thank you, Krista, for stepping back and shedding some perspective on how hard everyone has been working and what's been accomplished, and looking at it glass half full. I'm thinking maybe it might be nice to have a morning after article that has bullet points of each one of those things so that the community maybe we should do an annual report or an annual report card. I know several nonprofits have an annual report where they kind of summarize what they've accomplished and then, tick off 3 or 4 things that they hope to accomplish in the upcoming year. So maybe we need to do a little more marketing PR on what the council and what the town has been doing.
Good ideas, thank you. Okay, any other suggestions or additions or comments by the council?
Don't see any other raised hands.
Okay, then
But
I
thank
will
you.
move
This is a
on.
great list.
Thank you for the opportunity to celebrate. Okay. So last weekend I was preparing this PowerPoint and I was kind of looking at some of the other cities, and especially in the North Bay, have done in these types of annual meetings with their town council. And I found this, so I'm not the creator of this slide I'm going to show you, but I like it. I think it's really interesting, and it's we don't need to go through it in super detail, but its message is just to talk about what are the elements of our organizational capacity. And I even like the animation, and that's not me either. I got this from a PowerPoint from another city. But so elements of organizational capacity. These are the elements. We have our council capacity, and you provide clarity. And if you kind of look at the council here meets, you have your 12 monthly meetings, and then you've got usually your 2 extra meetings that are part of your annual strategic planning and your budget meetings. So let's say, you normally have about 14 meetings. What I understand from our town clerk is maybe the average is 3 hours. I mean, you certainly have those every once in a while, a meeting that'll go until 1:30 in the morning, but on average, it's usually about 3 hours. And so that's really saying that year round, the council, you have about 42 hours that you are together as a council. And this came up in the meetings about Branson, is that you don't really have that much time because of the Brown Act, where you're able to meet and discuss as a group. And then during those 42 hours, you have the council functions. Occasionally you'll have a closed session on labor negotiations or litigation or something. You, of course, every meeting you have time that's devoted to public comment. You devote some time to having your committees report out. And because you serve as the planning commission here, you do spend quite a bit of time at each of your council meetings on land use issues. We of course have finance items that we bring to you, and miscellaneous is another category, and it's a big category. It's all the public works stuff. It's everything, the minutes, et cetera, et cetera. And so then you've got a little bit of time to talk about your council priorities that maybe aren't in the everyday business that we do. And so the key messages here is you really do have a limited amount of time that the town council can discuss your priorities. And I thought this was kind of an interesting way of quantifying that. And then under staff capacity and direction, and this is a common percentage, is that 75% of staff time of cities and of municipalities is really devoted to the day-to-day services that we do. We have some limiting factors. Of course, we've got staff constraints. We have a very small staff here, occasionally turnover. We have, emergencies, urgent issues that come up that, of course, have to take priority. Occasionally there's changing direction, whether it's from the council or me, or having to change direction because of public of issues on the ground. Sometimes we have inadequate tools. It could be the things that come to mind in that are occasionally technology type things that if we don't have adequate tools, or our tools are not keeping pace with times, then that can be a limiting factor on what staff is able to accomplish. But then we also have some positive factors here in Ross. And one is we do have a very dedicated staff. It's small, but dedicated. We do have external resources, and I'm continually pleased to see the sense of regionalism that exists in Marin County, and the formal and informal partnerships that we have amongst the county and the cities and organizations here. And those resources are really important. And one thing that comes to mind is just yesterday, a couple of our staff and I had a meeting with Miranda Miller, who is the new full-time disaster preparedness coordinator for the Ross Valley Fire Department. And that is a resource that, gosh, few cities are able to take advantage. They pretty much have to get their own. And so that's an external resource. It's a very positive factor. And from my perspective, coming into this organization, I think that one of our positive factors is that I think thus far, the council has very reasonable expectations of staff and of what the organization can do every year. And that's not something that I take for granted, because I know you have a lot of things that you want to get done, but you also recognize our constraints, or you have an understanding of the role of government, et cetera. So I believe that's a positive factor. Financial capacity is most of our town funds are allocated to personnel. If we get new resources, they're typically consumed by new obligations. We have made and continue to make investments, and that does serve to reduce future burdens. And I'm thinking of our pension pay downs of our unfunded pension liability, and the savings towards our facilities. But what this does is it really results in focusing on one-time resources and opportunities for those resources. And a little bit later on, we'll have a discussion about some of the federal funding that we've received over this past year, which is one-time funding. Then the community capacity. The community capacity is really affected by, as we've seen, this rising divisiveness at all levels of government. We have a rising single or narrow issue interest, rising complexity, rising expectations, and expectations for the level of communication and kind of the instantaneous, the need for instant communication, which is challenging for local government to provide. But yet, even having said all that, the level of civic engagement is refreshing, and it is challenging, and it's one of the reasons we exist in local government. And then finally, external dynamics are something that we deal with every day. State mandates, heard about it in the housing element process, right? Regional competition, whether it's for grants, most recently, it's really it's about attracting and retaining employees. There's so much competition here in Marin, in part because of the high cost of living that we have here. state legislation. We also have CEQA and NEPA, either the state or the national environmental considerations. And so an example of this is all the work the town has had to do on the county flood control project, because we have a role in providing a review of the environmental documents. And then we also have extensive environmental review processes for many of our own projects. And so thinking of Winship Bridge, which the council has just authorized spending considerable resources to get that project to get through the environmental so that we can be most competitive for federal and state funding. External changes, absolutely. Recessions, inflation, absolutely is an external influence. Pension and healthcare costs, and then those technological advancements. So, you know, this is just something I just wanted to take a few minutes to just talk about capacity. And I'm not sure, I'm not asking for, you know, any decisions on this right now, but if you had any comments you'd like to make on the slide or questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Councilmember Kircher.
Yeah, I just have one comment. I think this is a great presentation. Thank you very much, Krista. Really helpful.
Oh, you're welcome. Great. Okay, well, thank you so much. Let me move on. Okay, Town of Ross, 5-year financial forecast. So if it looks familiar, that's because no, we don't always have to reinvent the wheel. And I thought that the PowerPoint from last year was really good. Joe did a really great job on it. So I'm using quite a few of his slides. And then of course, updated the financials. I want to give you a heads up that if you do have some questions, I might not be able to answer all of your questions, but lucky for me, we have an incredibly skilled and knowledgeable consulting accountant, Elizabeth Ford, who's worked with the town for many years. And she is on our call right now, our Zoom meeting right now, and she is also able to assist me. And then if she or I can't answer your questions, we'll certainly get back to you. So I just wanted to preface my forecast with that remark. Okay, so the purpose of this 5-year financial forecast is it's going to assist the town council and our management team in understanding the town's ability to fund current levels of services in the future. Is what we're doing, are the services that we're providing, are they sustainable? And it's also our ability to fund alternative programs and services in the short term and long term. There might be ideas the council members have or the members of the public have, and this helps us to see if do we have the resources to fund those. Okay. So what does the forecast do? So it projects revenue and expenses for fiscal year ending 2022, that's the one that we're in, through fiscal year ending 2027, and it's for the town's operating fund. It estimates revenue and expenses based on current town policies and state statutes. It includes a very modest level of capital expenses continuing to be funded by the operating fund. And it also includes an additional $200,000 per year for pension unfunded accrued liability paydown. So the town has made considerable progress in paying down its unfunded pension liability. There's still work to do, but this 5-year forecast includes that $200,000 a year, which is important, I believe. Okay. So we've got, now this information was provided to the council and the public in the staff report that was published this past Friday, but I just thought, let's just put this is a real nitty gritty right here. And what we're looking at right here is the bottom line is that based on our existing level of services and counting in that $200,000 a year towards pension pay down, is that, you know, our town, it's just what we're doing right now is sustainable over the next 5 years. And that is great news. You know, not every organization is able to do this. And it's really it's testimony to the council and the previous town manager and staff and the community for having this, for your conservative outlook into having this financial forecast be positive for us. The forecast results project small financial surpluses over the next year. Now, if you look at the first column, and let's see if you can see my cursor from my mouse. Right now, for the projected for fiscal year end 2022, which would be this June 30th, we're projecting a $403,000 surplus, which is a good amount. And one might ask, why is it that high? Why do we have that much money? And well, it's in part, it's due to very conservative forecasting of revenue. But as they start to come in through the year as actuals, we're seeing our surplus, which I believe last year was budgeted to be much less than this. What we're seeing now is an increase in revenue. So for example, we expect to receive about $100,000 more in property tax revenue than we budgeted for. The real estate transfer tax is also coming in higher than we budgeted for. Recreation revenue is coming in right now. We're projecting about $100,000 ahead of what we budgeted for recreation. And so that is, I think, people feeling, the pandemic is easing. People are feeling very confident, and we provide excellent, our staff provides excellent programming, and it's fitting the needs of our customers, our residents, and those that are able to participate in the programming. And then we've had significant savings in the departmental budgets, in part because we have had some salary savings from positions that have been unfilled, or we're having some challenges recruiting for positions. And also that, we still are in a pandemic, and Joe Chen was, working with the departments, was really trying to keep a lid on expenses. Because we have had some uncertainty. So as you see the projection for the surplus, kind of it decreases, but it's difficult to project out, but this is kind of where we want to be in 5 years from now. We want to be kind of right about online. So any questions about this, this slide, or would you like me to move on?
I have one question. Well, you mentioned that we are contributing $200,000 a year to pay down the CalPERS unfunded accrued liability. Is there any thought to making that $250,000, just given inflation and given how big that is?
Excuse me. Absolutely. And in fact, I understand that a year ago at this time, when you were in this meeting, when Joe Chen and staff were looking at a similar type of a surplus that Joe did obtain through the budget process. I don't know if it was in the February meeting or when you do the big April budget meeting, to bring forward a recommendation to the town council to increase the pay down. So it's my understanding that it was originally going to be about a $200,000 pay down, but because of the savings, the surplus that was projected, he asked the council and obtained authorization to pay down $600,000, to increase it by $400,000. So yes, as we move towards your April budget meeting, we, unless something happens, we should be able to recommend to the council to increase that pension liability pay down.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I have a question. My internet is really unstable, so I hope I can remain on the call. But the surplus / gap, projected out to 2026 and 2027, it's getting really, really small. And if there's a recession or something bad happens, I think we just need to be careful about the narrowing of that surplus.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And these are, this is very, very conservative projections when it comes to our property tax, real estate transfer tax, et cetera. Very, very conservative.
Okay. And I was also thinking instead of, I guess this will be a debate during the budget meeting. But I think our more immediate need is to increase the amount of funds available for the new facilities rather than continuing to pay down the pension liability. Because if I did the math right, we've already paid down more than $2.8 million in that pension liability. So that's just something for us to consider.
Yeah, and so we, the interest that you're paying to CalPERS is much, much higher than what we would anticipate interest on if the council decided to do some kind of debt financing for, that's something to note too, though. So if you're paying 7% to CalPERS on the unfunded liability, but I don't even know what rates are, but
Say 3%. Yeah.
yeah, there's
I
a big
get
difference.
that.
That's all part of it, but you're absolutely right. I mean, that's,
I just think if we're going to ask the voters to approve an amount of money and people realize, oh, $2.8 million wisely has been used to pay down the pension, it's like, well, why didn't you save that money for the building and then property owners would have to pay less for a bond? It's just something to think about.
yes. So that's going to be a decision point for the council, for sure. Okay, thank you. Let's moving on. So let's just talk just a couple of minutes about revenue. So we picked out some highlights for you all. There's been a 4% increase in total operating revenue during the current fiscal year. And then in spite of the pandemic, property taxes are expected to increase by another 6% in the upcoming fiscal year. So that's very good news. Property taxes are the largest source of revenue for the town of Ross. It accounts for 65% of our revenue. The public safety parcel tax that exists, it covers about 20% of our expenditures related to public safety, to police and fire. The public safety parcel tax rate in the current fiscal year is $1,085 per parcel. Unfortunately, our investment income continues to decrease with falling interest rates. Oops, wait, I went ahead. Okay. Our growth for revenues in fiscal year 23, ending 23, is projected to be 4%. And our forecasted revenue growth is projected to be about a 3% average growth rate in the following years. So this is a fun thing because this doesn't happen very often, where as part, and this is about the American Rescue Plan Act, which we call ARPA. This was the federal stimulus bill, and that is meant to aid our economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. This funding was provided to just about every jurisdiction in the United States, and it was a formula that was based on whether or not a town was a community development block grant entitlement. So it was kind of based on that formula. So the town received, and so it's given to jurisdictions in two chunks. So we received our first half of the money in July of 2021, and that was $293,000. And we expect to receive the same amount this coming June, for a total of $586,000 the town is receiving from the federal government for to aid in our economic recovery from COVID-19. So that's not something that we get very often, and it's a significant amount of funding for our community. The town has to obligate the funds by December 31st, 2024, and we have to spend them by December 31st, 2 years later in 2026. We have been waiting for the Federal Treasury Department to release its ruling. And so I believe former town manager Joe Chin, was very cautious and cautioned the council on spending this money until we knew we had clarity on what this money could be spent for and what it could not be spent for. And it took the Treasury Department almost a year to come up with its final rule. So they released it just this past January, and the ruling becomes effective April 1st. And it says that towns can use this funding for capital expenditures, to expand public sector hiring and capacity. Although keep in mind that it's only one time. We're not likely to get this money again. It can be used to provide premium pay for essential workers. That's typo there. I believe it's workers, not works. And some cities have done this for some of their staff that was very involved in response to the pandemic, especially last year. It can be used to broaden eligible broadband, water, and sewer infrastructure. It cannot be used for pension liability, and it cannot be used we just can't sock it away and keep it in your general fund reserve. So this funding, we went ahead and Joe Chin asked the town council for approval, I believe last August timeframe, to use $11,000 of this funding to contribute to the County of Marin for a homeless program and a regional homeless program. So that money has been spent. But besides that, the rest of the funds that we have received thus far have been put straight into the facilities fund. And the council, and it's your decision on whether to leave it there or spend it on something else. But we wanted you to know what you can spend it on and what you can't. So in the area, any questions about ARPA? Okay, moving on to expenses. So again, just put together just a few little highlights. Our operating fund expenses are projected to grow on average approximately 4% per year, excluding one-time expenditures. So this means we have 8.8 million for the current fiscal year. And then by 2027, we would expect to have expenses equating to 10.5 million. Our wages and benefits comprise 45% of our total expenses. And that gets back to that slide I had, which showed you about some of our financial capacity. Wages are estimated to increase 4% per year moving forward. I wanted to note that we have a memorandum of understanding with our police officers bargaining group. That memorandum of understanding expires this June 30th, 2022, and we will be negotiating a new one. And so I'm going to send you a little update on that later on this week, but we have initially started those discussions and looking forward to working on that. To continue with expenses, just a few highlights. So our pension costs are stabilizing with the enactment of PEPRA provisions, and those were the CalPERS changes made in, I believe, 2013, and the pay down of our unfunded liability. However, as we've read about in the newspaper a lot, CalPERS investment gains and losses contribute to this unpredictability of future costs. So, we hear, oh no, CalPERS is nowhere close to being where they want to be in terms of gains. And then I believe it was this last year, they had over a 20% gain. So it just very much fluctuates. The town's pension costs in our last fiscal year ending 21 were 562,000. And they're estimated to increase to 814,000 by fiscal year 27. So this is very common with all cities. And I was looking at some of the information that actually Joe prepared for the council last year, where he made the comment that this is a large increase. However, if the council had not been as aggressive towards paying down its unfunded liability, it would be so much worse. So certainly something we need to keep track of, certainly not good news, but a lot better than it could be. And we are in much better shape than a lot of other cities are. The fire department JPA costs are projected to increase about 3.5% annually in the future. And just a note that our fire department expenses for fire service constitutes about 27% of the town's operating costs. Anything about expenses? Any questions you might have of my highlights? There's a lot more information in the staff report that was sent to you. Councilmember Kircher.
I have a question about the police memorandum of understanding. What does that cover?
That covers their wages, their working conditions, all kinds of stuff.
So it's a memorandum of understanding as opposed to a contract?
Yes.
The contracts flow from that, or are the contracts just
No,
individual with the
it
police
is the
officers?
It is the contract for them.
Oh, okay.
So that's just that's what it's called, as a memorandum of understanding. I need to ask Ben for the absolute particulars of why it's called that, but they're called memorandums of understanding because they affect, of course, wages, but all kinds of conditions. It covers discipline, holidays, processes by which, disabilities, all that stuff. And so we are, I'll be providing some more information this week, but we're getting started on it. And there is the council absolutely has a role to play, not at the table, but in providing negotiating parameters to me and your negotiator, and to absolutely approving the memorandum of understanding at a council meeting. Okay. So in summary, let's see. The current level of services are fundable over the next 5 years. It's good news. We expect to have small surpluses that may be available to help fund capital or one-time expenses. The town's additional payments to CalPERS and for retiree health costs have generated significant cost reductions, which enhance the future financial sustainability of the town. And then importantly, the public safety parcel tax is up for renewal in November of 2024 because it expires at the end of fiscal year 25. If a new safety tax measure is not approved by the voters before fiscal year 26, then there will be a $1 million shortfall in the town's operating fund budget. And that is a very sobering final statement there to lead us into just a little bit about our challenges and opportunities. So we have a handful of challenges. So we have a need for additional funding to address our deferred capital needs and our obsolete facilities. I know you're all very aware of that. Our pension costs are growing. Our fire costs are growing. Public safety tax measure expires at the end of fiscal year 25. However, we also have opportunities and strategies. So you made your decision on the facilities, an important part of the decision to close the fire station and to rebuild and to develop funding plan with site plans. So that process is going to be starting at your next council meeting in April, we plan to bring forward our interim planning and building director, David Woltering, is going to bring forward the request for proposals document for a facility master plan. We're going to be bringing forward the request for proposals document to you. That's not always done, but I would like to do that here so that I can get council feedback about it and to make sure that we're all on the same page about what we're asking a consultant team to do with that master plan. So look forward to that on your April meeting. We'll continue the strategy to reduce our retirement costs. With other JPA members, we want to find ways to reduce costs. We do anticipate a savings from the amended JPA agreement with Ross Valley Fire Department. We're not going to see this savings for a few years until the plan is put in place where the town's fire station closes. And that allows the department to move around their personnel, therefore resulting in some savings. It's estimated to be about $300,000 a year to the town of Ross, but we will not realize that entire savings until the program has actually been fully implemented. And a strategy for the council to consider is to seek voter approval to extend the public safety tax to fund police and fire operational costs. Let's see, so do you have before we move on to the 5-year capital improvement program, do you have any other questions or comments for me?
Well, I have one comment. It's just about the parcel tax renewal. You know, it hasn't always passed in years past, and most recently it passed with 79% yes votes. And I think that a main reason for that was that there was a perception that the town was being very well run, and it was being very well run financially, with good decisions being made about the town's finances. And you know, that should be our goal, is to, you know, share, you know, how we are prudent and careful with money, because then that gets us, you know, an approval for people to tax themselves to keep the town going.
Councilmember McMillan?
Yeah, I was just going to say, this parcel tax renewal, the timing of that becomes a little more nuanced, given that we're also going to have to seek funding to supplement the facilities amount that we have to pay for the new facilities. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be all coordinating all of that and figuring out the timing and the priority is going to be really challenging.
I agree. Well, Mayor, I might suggest a break right now before we
Fine.
get to the CIP, if that. for you
Seems
to-
like the perfect time. Are you thinking 10 or 15 minutes? 5, 10 or 15? What do you suggest, Krista?
10.
10. All right. My phone says 10:43. So at 10:53, we will reconvene. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're continuing the special meeting of the Rosstown Council, our
Do something.
strategic.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. This is a continuation of the special meeting after our break, March 15. We are at item number 7, which is the draft 5-year capital improvement plan. And that will be kicked off by Public Works Director Rich Simonich. Rich?
Yes, good morning, Mayor and council members. We're going to look at the 5-year CIP as we stand today, and then looking forward over the next, actually, it turns out to be 4 years, since I cover this fiscal year as well as part of the 5 years. So Krista, if you could share the screen and we can move forward with our overview this morning. Yes, so a 5-year capital improvement program. These are actually a photograph of two of our one of our main concerns in our funding challenges. We have the dilapidated fire station on the left and the Winship Bridge on the right, and we'll talk about those in a little bit more. So next slide. So the CIP, Capital Improvement Program, planning tool to identify facilities and infrastructure improvements, that's broken down into our roadways, our drainage fund, and our facilities and equipment fund. So we identify those improvements, costs, and revenues, beginning with this the fiscal year through fiscal year 2026. And opportunity to update our long-term CIP for the town, which will be part of this budget document as we move forward towards April, May, June discussions. Next slide. It guides the consideration, selection, and development of capital improvements. One of the reasons we are meeting today, we meet a little bit early before the main budget discussions to go over a few of the upcoming projects that we have planned for the next fiscal year and the fiscal years to come, to get some input from you council members as to where you want to go in the direction of the roadway fund, the drainage fund, and the facilities and equipment fund. And it's a dynamic document that changes from year to year as our priorities, needs, and funding opportunities change. Next slide. So project fiscal year end 22 project review. So the pavement rehabilitation program was a success. We completed that towards the in fall of 2021. We had the remainder of Redwood Avenue paved, Ross Common paved, kind of the remainder of that one too, after Poplar was paved a few years back after the sewer program from Ross Valley Sanitation District came through and kind of tore up our roadways. And we all remember that wonderful summer. And we got the post office parking lot repaved too. I don't know how long that's been since we've done that, but it needed a facelift, and that came out really well. The Laurel Grove Safe Pathways project has moved forward in its design process. I'm still hopeful we can start construction in 2023, early next fiscal year. And the drainage fund, the drainage program, we installed the Bolinas drain flap gate at the Winship Bridge. That's adds a little bit more protection to Bolinas Avenue residents who are actually, their elevation's a little bit lower than the that outfall, the soffit, the top of that outfall. So it's a very good opportunity to put in this flap gate so that when the flood surge comes down through Corte Madera Creek, it won't back up into the Bolinas Avenue residents. So it's a little bit additional protection for those residents at pretty much a nominal cost to install that. Just recently, a few weeks back, we did the Bolinas Avenue curb and gutter repair. There were a number of locations or a large stretch of curb and gutter on Bolinas Avenue that was broken up and did not get repaired when we went through with the street improvement program a few years back with the town of San Anselmo. So that had a number of what we call bird baths where it just wasn't draining properly. So we went through and fixed that curb and gutter up, and we're going to do a little bit of repaving in that area to make sure the roadway properly drains into that curb and gutter. So that should all be finished up here within the next couple of weeks. We did select a consultant for the storm drain master plan. I've been working with them over the past few months. We were updating our GIS database to fill in all the gaps that we have in the information that we did populate a few years back when we did start a storm drain master plan. I think it was back in 2012. We didn't get too far, but we did establish a good sized GIS database, and we're updating that currently. And then we move into identifying maintenance repair priorities over the next several years so we can structure our expenditures on our drainage fund effectively through that master plan implementation. And we've made progress on the Winship Bridge. NEPA, just recently, we did complete another one of the studies that Caltrans wanted for their NEPA evaluation. So we're getting very close. I'm hoping by the time we meet in May that we will have NEPA all wrapped up and in a good position to get some of that funding that should be coming down the road for infrastructure under the Biden administration's infrastructure funding plan. Next slide. a continuation of the year in review for facilities. We did an extensive repair on the roof. Several areas of the roof over the fire station and police station were leaking. We saw a lot of leaking in the room where we have all of our computer, server, and telephone equipment. That was kind of scary, but we did identify several leak areas, and a highly qualified repair company came in and did a lot of sealing and repair on the roof. So that was badly needed. We did install, with the help of RPOA and a Zero Waste Marin grant, the Natalie Coffin Green Park drinking fountain. It looks great up there. People, from what I hear, are very happy to have that. And we did complete the Roscommon Landscape Rehabilitation Master Plan, and I've got a project planned for this upcoming fiscal year where we're going to remove and replace all of the walkway paths in Roscommon and along Roscommon Avenue, as well as identified in that master plan. We are installing, like Krista mentioned today, and this week we'll be installing the post office EV stations. That's 2 regular parking stall charging stations, and then 1 charging station for an accessible parking stall. And we did complete the town hall video installation with just a great company that came in, and they knew what to do, and they installed all the videos with minimal damage to our town hall, and whatever holes they did open up, they covered up, and everything looks great for that. We're getting ready for that in the coming months for return to the town hall. Next slide. So near-term CIP projects. So that's really what we're here today to discuss a little bit, kind of get the yay and the nay of where I've envisioned, based on the certain reports and forecasting of our funding, where I'd like to see the CIP to go at least this year, and then we can look a little bit further down the road, a little bit coming up in this presentation. So one of the projects I'm looking at, very important, the town hall parking repair and EV station parking. That's the EV station that we installed on the wall of the police station a few years back. And most of you have probably seen how the big redwood tree is lifting up the curb and gutter and just destroying the pavement, as well as the 1 accessible parking stall we have there. So, and there's also a challenge for only 1 car can park at the EV station, which has 2 heads. So what I have done is developed a plan with our engineering consultants to redo that parking area and actually create 2 parking stalls for the EV station that would, we've got it oriented so that it would not block ingress and egress for the emergency vehicles coming and going. And that, so that's the first project proposed. And I have costs that are identified in your staff report. The expenses are outlined on page 6 and the revenues on page 7, but we can look at that after we go through these projects, and we'll open up for some questions if that's the direction we want to go. Bolinas Storm Drain Extension. Now, this is a project I've been looking at for a long time. So we recall 2 or 3 years back, we did rehabilitate the Bolinas Storm Drain. It's quite expensive. It was a joint project with San Anselmo. We added additional flood risk reduction on Bolinas by doing this, but we can get a little bit more flood risk reduction by taking the drain from where it currently, the improvements ended at the intersection of Bolinas and Sir Francis Drake. I want to turn 90 degrees and head down Sir Francis Drake Boulevard with this outfall instead of its current outfall under the Winship Bridge. So we take it down Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, which this will also allow us to finally abandon a stretch of a storm drain that runs through private property without an easement, which was created when we transferred that the Rosstown parcel to private property owners back in 2012. We left a storm drain in there with no easement. This would bypass that and keep all of our storm drain infrastructure within the public right of way. And it would outfall beneath or just downstream of the Sir Francis Drake Bridge over Corte Madera Creek, which is you're at a lower elevation, so you have less backwater effect coming back up into the Bolinas Avenue and that intersection of Bolinas and Sir Francis Drake. So technically, this project, it is a little bit expensive. It's funded by the Drainage Fund. We do have a pretty healthy drainage fund, but there are other projects, smaller projects, mainly identified, that'll be identified through the master plan for rehabilitation and maintenance. But this would be the big ticket capital expenditure for the drainage fund. So basically, we gave Bolinas Avenue maybe a 6 or 7 year flood protection by putting in the storm drain a few years back. This additional extension would bring it to like a 10 or a 12 year level of flood risk protection. So we can discuss each one of these projects as we move forward. Laurel Grove pedestrian pathway extension. So that's the project that would extend the current pathway that is planned up to Canyon. We would extend that from Canyon all the way down to Macon Grade or somewhere in between, depending on funding. We did receive a $75,000 grant just a few weeks back from MTC, $75,000 to do some initial engineering and some surveying to get a better idea of the feasibility of that extension. That is an expensive project as well. It probably would require a little bit of, would require some grant funding to keep the roadway fund in the positive area. So that one's really based on available funding and grant funding down the road. But it is an important project, I think, for our overall protection of pedestrians headed to Ross School and basically walking to and from Sir Francis Drake Boulevard during the day. Fernhill Avenue is now up for pavement rehabilitation based on its pavement condition. It's next in line. But with that, we are considering a pedestrian pathway between Norwood and Branson. And this was discussed a little bit. You may recall 3 or 4 years back when we had a private development on Circle Drive doing their tear down rebuild. We requested that they put in a pedestrian pathway along their frontage, or actually this would be the rear of their yard. It was contested by the property owners, but during those discussions, I recall that the Branson School was very interested in seeing a pathway put in there. So maybe there's some opportunities for discussion with Branson for a sort of a private public partnership on installing that pathway. We can look at that over the next few months, but that is an opportunity to talk to Branson and see if that is a project that would be of interest to them as well as our residents here in town. Natalie Coffin Green Park pedestrian bridge replacement. That is they are getting pretty wobbly. They're still fairly safe as long as no one drives a car over them, which no one is allowed to drive a car over them, nor would a car really fit over them. But they are due, I think, within the next few years of getting replaced. But that is a sizable expenditure out of our facilities and equipment fund that would need to be considered. Pedestrian safety elements, looking at maybe fixing up the pathway along Sir Francis Drake, looking at maybe some more traffic, maybe passive traffic calming elements on Sir Francis Drake and Bolinas and Lagunitas, maybe those streets that see the highest speeds by motorists. The portable toilet enclosures, that's a joint program with RPOA to put some nice redwood enclosures around the porta potty at Frederick Allen Park and at Natalie Coffin Green Park. So we're getting some new estimates for that. I think that's a great little project. It's not too expensive, and it'll really beautify the entries to our 2 parks. And the implementation of the Roscommon Landscape Master Plan, again, as I mentioned, we're looking to do that project in July, after July 4th, to redo all of the pathways on Roscommon. So midterm CIP projects. We're still processing the Rule 20B West Ross Underground Utility District. That my role and town staff role is currently nominal input, as our engineer that we hired for the assessment district is working with PG&E. PG&E is now, engineers are now on board, and they're working together to develop that plan and get a better idea of those costs. But I think we're still a few years out with bringing that to council for a vote on the assessment district, but it is moving along. It's a huge milestone to actually have a project manager at PG&E and a group of engineers working on that project. So we're making good progress on that. The Rule 20A undergrounding utility district for the town hall area. So that's kind of a companion project with whatever we are planning to do with our facilities here on our parcel when we rebuild the administration, police, and the EMT buildings, as we've been discussing. To improve ingress and egress, we need to take down some of these poles that are in front here along Lagunitas and Sir Francis Drake in front of Town Hall, and in order to reconstruct a more functional access to this parcel, a functional driveway, hopefully opposite Laurel Grove, turn that into sort of a four-way intersection. That's an expensive project. Rule 20A, as that I outlined in the staff report, has been greatly modified by the CPUC lately. They've stopped the Rule 20A credit program, and they've put a big damper on the ability for agencies to purchase Rule 20A credits from other agencies. It's now being overseen by the CPUC. So there are, within the last year and a half, some serious funding considerations and limitations that are impacting the costs on Rule 20A and that project. So it's likely, and this is outlined in the staff report, that some of that money will need to come out of the facilities and equipment fund as well. And implementing the storm drain master plan, as I discussed, that'll be at least a 5-year process of maintenance and repair of our system. That's deferred improvements probably go back 25, 30 years of never doing anything really to make sure we're in good shape for the coming years. And the construction of the Winship Bridge, like I mentioned, we are moving forward with the NEPA process. If you could see from the exhibit that was attached to the staff report for Winship Bridge, the HBP funding, as we discussed, I've zeroed that out for the balance of this fiscal year, next fiscal year. But it looks very likely, from what I'm hearing around the scuttlebutt and the public works arena, that the new infrastructure funding is going to definitely trickle down into the HBP program. And with NEPA completed and hopefully the right-of-way completed as well, I'm confident we'll be in good shape to resume that funding and make up the current deficit, the current spending from the drainage fund. There's no deficit spending from the drainage fund. It's in good shape to cover us all the way through the 5-year CIP. Next slide. And then the long-term CIP facilities and challenges, replacing the functionally obsolete town buildings, as we'll discuss in depth in a little bit. And the big dollar cost of rebuilding these buildings. We're estimating up to $14.6 million to also include the paramedic staff. And we can talk about funding, either Krista and I, and how that approach might be taken. Next slide. So the funding ability for the facilities, minimum of 500,000 included in the future annual funding from the operating fund. That's the capital improvement program operates on or functions on three funds. That's the roadway fund, which is mainly funded by impact fees, roadway impact fees, and by the TAM measure, a Marin County measure that we get for that. And there's SB1 gives us a little money, and gas tax gives us money as well. Then the drainage fund is also funded by impact fees and HBP when it finally comes in action. The facilities and equipment fund is a little bit different. It doesn't have any impact fees really moving in to fund it. So in order to do these large scale projects, we do have to, we've been continually, as Krista mentioned, transferring money from the operating fund into the facilities and equipment fund to fund this project that's looming in the near future. So other funding sources that could be reviewed and analyzed and pursued for the facilities and equipment fund is additional funds from the operating fund, partnering relations and donations, debt financing, including potential ballot measures. In my discussion with Krista, she's come up with some just baseline creative debt financing that might be in lieu of or in addition to ballot measures. We don't need to marry ourselves to selling bonds and ballot measures. There are some opportunities to fund with alternative measures for that. So next slide.
Thank you, Rich. That's the end of your part of the presentation.
Oh, great. So
Yeah, thank you.
I'll hand it back to Krista, and then we can, let's have a little discussion on what we talked about.
Right. I'd like to just make a couple of notes. Thank you, Rich. Getting back to Councilmember McMillan's comment about, the financial forecast slide that we showed, where by year 5 for the operating fund, that by year 5, we were down to about 28,000, I think, as a surplus. It's important to note that built into that financial forecast, in addition to including 200,000 per year as for a pay down of the unfunded pension liability, that 5-year financial forecast also includes $550,000 for the current year, and then $500,000 for the future years to pay out of the operating fund, moving it into the facilities fund. So right there is a $700,000 pay down and paying into your savings account for facilities and paying down the pension liability. So I wanted to note that because I neglected to do that in the previous slide. Okay, would you like to talk about the CIP now? The next portion of the presentation is about the one-time non-capital type projects priorities for the coming draft priorities for the coming year. So we can go through that and then talk about it all, or we can just stop and talk about the CIP. And I see that Mayor Pro Tem Cool has his hand up.
Yeah, I have a question for Rich about the Fern Hill sidewalk. As you may know, I got some criticism from Molly Gamble among other things, wanting to wait until there was an accident before we did anything about the Fern Hill sidewalk. And of course, we considered it, as you mentioned, several years ago in connection with a private project there. And I remember there being some problems. It seems to me it didn't qualify for a regular sidewalk, but I noticed what you're going to put in is just a blacktop sidewalk. But aren't there also problems with a tree and a power pole being in the middle of the path of where that sidewalk would be?
Yeah, good memory there, Beach. So earlier about a month ago, I met with John Moe and his crew who are engineering consultants, and we did walk the pathway, and we didn't really see anything. We saw the pole that you mentioned, and there's a tree here and there, but there is an opportunity to fit a 4-foot pathway through the entire stretch, and most of the locations it can then widen out to a 6-foot width. So Mo Engineering is looking at the problem right now, and but for what we saw, it's feasible. We can get the pathway in.
Are there problems? Do we have access? Do we own all the property that we need?
Yes, it's all public
Good.
right of way.
Thanks very much.
Councilmember Kircher.
I have a question about a couple of different subjects, and the question is, is there some relationship between all three of the projects? One of those projects is extending the Bolinas drain down so that it enters the creek closer to or at the bridge. Number one. Number two, undergrounding the utilities in front of the town hall. And then the other was improvements in safety along Sir Francis Drake. Is there a relationship between this? In other words, if you're going to underground the drain, does that provide some opportunity perhaps to do a more extensive undergrounding of utilities? Or are these completely separate? And then to the extent there would be construction of the Bolinas drain, does that provide any opportunities to increase safety along Sir Francis Drake?
So the Bolinas drain does not really relate to public safety per se on the surface of Sir Francis Drake. It's really an underground project. We're redirecting the current outfall that's under the Winship Bridge down to below the Sir Francis Drake Bridge. We will need to rebuild the sidewalk on several places between Bolinas and the Sir Francis Drake Bridge. So there's an opportunity to maybe widen the sidewalk. And there's always opportunities to put in additional signages about the narrow road of where it crosses the Corte Madera Creek at the bridge, things like that. But so just on a collateral view, there are opportunities to rebuild the sidewalk as we open trench that drain underneath, mainly underneath the sidewalk. Your other question regarding the undergrounding at Town Hall and the safety of Sir Francis Drake. So that there's not a real, to answer your overlying question, those three projects are not really related in my mind. They weren't developed as to be a nexus within each other. But again, there are opportunities as we remove poles to have more wider sidewalks and the ability for pedestrians and bicycles to use those stretches of roadways. Where you won't have a bicycle who sees a pole coming up and he's got to go into the traffic and those sort of incidents. So just on a very, very minor collateral sort of idea, is there safety integrated into these projects that you mentioned?
Well, if you're trenching in order to create this new drain or redirect the drain, is any of that trenching applicable to or useful for also undergrounding utilities? Because a significant part of the cost of undergrounding utilities, I would think, is trenching. Or are these different trenches totally different elements?
Yeah, you definitely, you have to have two separate trenches. You can't put high voltage into a trench with a storm drain. So that would be, and it's already very crowded in this between Bolinas and the bridge to try to do anything like that. So we would have to, they'd be two separate funding projects too, where you'd have a Rule 20A or our own capital program to underground the utility lines in that location. But I don't I'd have to take a look, but I don't know if we have if the poles are even on that side of the street. So, but to answer your question, those are two separate trenches, two separate projects, and two separate funding sources too. One is a facilities fund and the other is a drainage fund. So it's not really a practical consideration, I think, to couple undergrounding of utilities with the relocation of a storm drain trench, unless you've got a lot of room and a brand new road that you're planning. But Sir Francis Drake is very crowded with sewer, water. It's got telecommunications underground. There's not a lot of room to do much there. But I like the way you're thinking of how to couple these things together. But this particular one, I think, is a little bit problematic.
Councilmember McMillan.
Thank you. I just have 3 questions / comments. The first is on the facilities. Rich, you mentioned 14.6 million to reconstruct the admin and the paramedic and
Police.
Thank you, police. And, I'm just wondering, I'm watching the construction costs and raw material costs just skyrocketing. And so I'm wondering if that figure is really accurate, if there's going to be huge amounts of inflation going forward. I just want to be sure that our estimate is in the ballpark of reality. I think the estimate was created before a lot of stuff has happened.
Yeah, very good points, Councilmember McMillan. We definitely are going to keep an eye on that. And I do believe there's been an increase, I think up to 5% even since the last time we said, wow, construction costs are getting out of control.
Yeah.
So yeah, especially in roadway type projects and the facilities fund, which we rely on transfers from the operating fund to get these projects going. We need to keep an eye on that, on what the budget is and what the revenue stream is, also how that's being impacted as well. So I think it's currently okay right now as kind of a holding number, but I think by next year we do definitely need to take a look at these costs, because you're right, they just keep going up.
Yeah. And then you mentioned pedestrian improvement steps on Sir Francis Drake. I live in Winship Park and I turn left out of Winship to get onto Sir Francis Drake. And every time you do that, you're taking your life into your own hands, especially when the cars are going 40 to 45 miles an hour. And some of these drivers think that it's really fun to accelerate when you're trying to turn left out of the Winship Park area to, see how quickly your heart can beat. So I think we really need to take a look. And I've been mentioning this since before I was on the council. This is a big issue. So I'm hoping that we can also not only include the pedestrian issues along Sir Francis Drake, but also the egress out of Winship.
Right, and safety is safety. They're both interrelated. And I've talked to Chief Pata a little bit about what we can do in between capital improvements and police enforcement to control drivers, which is very hard, as you know, human nature. You can do this and this and this, and you're still going to get people who are going to speed through. So it's going to be a combination of some type of speed control with signage. We don't want to do speed bumps on Sir Francis Drake. That's not going to happen. So we need to do some brainstorming and some between Krista and I and Chief Pata, some discussions on enforcement, which has already been happening over the past few months, and we've kind of upticked it. But are we seeing an improvement? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Is stoplight there an option?
That would be a great option.
It's an option. We would have to do a regional traffic study with the rest of the corridor to see how that works. If that's something council wants to look at, when College of Marin is in session, the traffic already without a traffic signal already backs. I've seen it backed up to Bolinas and beyond on some days. So a traffic signal there, whether you have the queuing room between that new traffic signal at Winship and Bolinas, where then you're really going to have cars that are going to be pouring into the intersection of Bolinas. So I'm not a traffic engineer, but I can see that there are problems associated with the traffic signal there. But if you'd like us to do just a cursory review with a traffic consultant, we can definitely do that.
Okay. Julie, was that the last of your questions?
No, my last question is, we discussed extensively during the Branson CUP. One of their proposed safety mitigation steps was having a pathway between Branson and Norwood. So I'm encouraged, Rich, that you are exploring that, and I'm hopeful that Branson will take an active role in terms of participating, as well as participating financially in developing that pathway.
Yeah.
Councilmember Breckus.
Thank you. I just want to say, because the traffic light on Winship has been raised before, and it's been, I really am opposed to it, just so you know. I don't want, I feel like it's easier to get out of my property, which is even a tighter turn with less vantage point than from that Winship Bridge, when the traffics are backed up in the morning because people don't let you in. And the neighbors that have previously spoken about that area, I think of my parents and also people up on, right in that intersection, don't want a row of cars lined up for a light. So I think enforcement is the better avenue than a traffic light. And I think also you're going to have people, from that distance of Bolinas to that location, you would have a very short distance with cars going through. And so I just think it would be gridlock versus, letting people flow through. And you don't presently have at that Winship stop sign, you don't have a row of cars lined up for, up and down the street. And I think you'd create that. So I do think enforcement is the issue. And, that bus stop, there's perfect space for police cars to be parked. To even slow people down, in that way. But I did want to just raise, that I'm not sure your list suggests you were looking at these areas, but if there is traffic studies done, I think that it would be a good idea to look at roundabouts and study those as options. There's 2 places in the downtown where we have people making illegal U-turns, and where U-turns are needed. And one of them is, you head past school, you don't get a parking spot there. You overshoot on Lagunitas, you overshoot Shady, and then you can make that U-turn there. People on the weekend don't know where you can make the U-turn and where you can't, which is logical. Some of them just pull into people's driveways, but I see people doing U-turns there all the time. And I just don't know if a roundabout could or should be studied at any of those locations, either the Shady Lagunitas Allen intersection or Willow Lagunitas. But it seems to me that some direction is needed so people can understand what they can do. I also see a lot of U-turns in the morning in front around the school, and people don't want to be bogged down by having to, go through the post office parking lot, which does take a bunch of time. So they just make U-turns. And sometimes it feels perfectly safe to make U-turns. It's not like it's a bad situation, but it's not legal. And so I just wonder if you couldn't put a roundabout somewhere like where the bike shop is, and whether there's enough space. I wouldn't want to eliminate parking, because I think parking is still an issue. And I also still think, I still don't understand why we can't have more parking behind the baseball diamond. There used to be parking there, it got eliminated. Now we have the gardeners parking their stuff there. And that doesn't seem, if it's safe for them to do it, it seems to me that it's safe for residents to park there. So that's my traffic, parking, and rant for the council meeting. Thanks.
Well,
And then
I'm a
Rich-
huge proponent of roundabouts, having run motor tours of Europe with a group of people. I've actually enjoyed being able to drive from Paris to Brussels without ever hitting a stoplight. It was just incredible to me. So a few years back, Parisi did do an analysis of a roundabout at Shady and Lagunitas at that intersection. Now, if I don't know if I get enough show of hands, I'm happy to pursue that further and get a traffic report and then turn it into a capital project. If it would, because of the roadway fund is getting a little bit stressed, we'd have to move some projects around to accommodate that. But it's already a pretty aggressive pavement restoration plan, so we could probably accommodate that project. So I don't know if we take a show of hands or if somehow you can let me know that that is a project we want to pursue. I will definitely put some energy into making that happen.
So Rich, for these, you had a list of projects. Was that prioritized, or is our job today to prioritize them and add to them? Like exactly what are we offering as council members today?
So those are the current projects proposed are actually, I've worked them out, I've budgeted them, and we've actually started preliminary engineering on them. If
Okay.
any of those want to be pulled and not pursued, let me know. The Fernhill pathway, I've got preliminary estimates, but they're not really moving forward on any design work until we really know where we want to go with that. I want to start some conversations with Branson, work with Krista on that. The rest of the projects they're budgeted, and we are moving forward unless I hear otherwise. The current fiscal year or the next year fiscal year projects. The long range stuff, that's like the extension of the pathway on Laurel Grove. If we definitely want to do that, I've got to also move a couple of the pavement restoration projects around, but we still have a few years as those approach the year of execution to discuss those. But really, I wanted to let you know what we're planning this year. We've worked the budget around, and then the looking downstream, if you will, to the other projects. If you had any comments, or really, if like what Elizabeth Breckus came up with is projects we want to look at and put them in the pipeline.
Okay, just one quick thing. So it sounds like we're talking about how much do we want to put into extending the Laurel Grove sidewalk? Do we want to consider the roundabout that we just brought up? Do we want to consider the Fernhill sidewalk? I mean, that's what we can give you direction on.
Yes.
I had one comment about an existing project, the town hall parking lot. Now, if we're going to redo the facilities in town hall, why would we redo the parking lot now? Because we want to just get redone again in about 2 years.
I would say we're not 2 years away from getting this, the facilities reconstructed. We've got an EIR process to go through. We still have to get the master plan. We're looking 4 or 5 years down the road, and this is a real, we're in violation of certain accessibility laws. Plus we have a 2-head charger that only one car can barely use. So I felt that this is a project that, even with a 5-year lifespan, it's something that is needed in this it's just the little location between the police station and town hall that's
Okay.
going to get rebuilt.
Okay, so Town Manager Johnson, and then let's try to wrap it up on comments of which things we should continue moving forward on and projects that we want to pull if there are any. Krista.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick note that I believe, Rich, that this isn't the first time the council's seen most of these CIPs, correct? Because the CIP is a 5-year document. And so you saw a lot of these projects in the 5-year document last year, but they were, mid-year. Well, now they're moving. So that's kind of why he's already started, doing some preliminary spending his own time working on these and trying to start costing them out and seeing what it needs. And then, of course, each project has multiple actions that would need to go to council before they're actually done. So
Right.
I just wanted to confirm that. Is there, of these projects that you just talked about, Rich, are any of them brand new?
I think this town hall parking lot we've never really discussed it with the council, getting this work done. And we did talk about the bathroom enclosures, but after the last year's budget process, so those are somewhat vetted, and that's not a big, that's like $18,000 between both RPOA and us. So for the most part, except for these smaller ones that pop up, yeah, we've already discussed them through town council for the most part.
Yeah, and that means you can't, it doesn't mean you can't change them around, but I just wanted to emphasize that this isn't the first time. It's been part of a kind of a 5-year look at it. So that's all.
Okay, so Councilmember Kircher and then Councilmember Breckus.
I'd just like to voice additional support for consideration of roundabouts. I agree with Elizabeth Breckus, and also would like to add it's important for bike safety too. Bikers tend to just go right through stop signs and whatnot. And with roundabouts, I think that actually helps. As a biker, it's a little strange when you first ride a bike into a roundabout, but you get right into it, and it works pretty well. But I think that the bigger point though is, particularly downtown, it's a way to make a U-turn safely, and so I'm very much in support of that.
Councilmember Breckus.
Thank you. I just wasn't totally sure I understood the ADA change, the back parking lot, and the cost. Like, I'm seeing it in different categories. So could you just explain to us what these different costs are?
So the parking lot improvement is basically the town hall improvement. It's not really under the ADA transition plan funding. So let's see. It's about a $25,000 project under town hall improvements, currently under expenses, figure 1, page 6 of the CIP.
I'm sorry. Okay, on page 6. So what you're saying is it would be $25,000. Well, so that's the expense of doing that work. Is that right?
25,000 in to finish off this year, and then 25,000 into next year. Let me verify that price, that cost.
Well, and I'm just curious, how are you going to do that? Because I mean, I agree that ADA area is bumpy. I mean, I think it's, but can you cut roots of a redwood tree like that? I mean, what is the plan?
So I met with Anthony and Ed Gurka when we discussed this project. Ed thinks that we can, some of those roots can be cut or trimmed, and then he actually places some material that has a pesticide on it, so that the roots actually move away from this material that you lay down before you do the asphalt. So that's the next phase is working. Next phase of design is working with Ed a little bit more to work that into the bid documents on how we're going to protect the tree roots and keep it from happening again, whether we need to make it a little bit thicker, a thicker base over the roots. But that's a great point. But we are looking at that with the town arborist to make sure that it doesn't ruin what we do and that we don't harm the tree itself.
So that's the $25,000. That's just the parking lot. But then there's the EV part. And then is that also that include the 25,000 includes the handicap? I should call it disability parking spot.
Accessible parking.
Accessible parking. Thank you. So can you tell me, is that, I just want to understand the cost of what we're doing back there, especially in light of what Beach said, which is, or somebody said, I'm sorry, that we are contemplating redoing that.
Yeah, well, maybe I can share my screen with you. Or I post out Roscoe Town Hall parking improvements. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Actually, the cost for this project is about 45,000. So it spans to this fiscal year, next fiscal year. Let me get the. All right, here we go.
And it includes all three components, the ADA parking spot, the EV, and then dealing with the bumpy pavement outside Town Hall.
Yeah, it does. So the new parking spaces for the EV station, which already exists, would just be striping, a very nominal part of the cost, but I don't see a recent.
Well, are we adding another ADA spot?
No, we're adding 2 compact spots to park at the EV station. That's all. And we're eliminating the parking stall that was the DPW secretary stall. We're thinking of removing that pavement and just turning it maybe into a lunch picnic area where, since we're gaining 2 spaces over by the EV station, we'd eliminate that 1 space and turn it into an open mulch area where people can sit and eat lunch or something like that. So that's what we're proposing.
Well, I wonder if that expense for creating the 2 spots for the EV station really makes sense if we're gonna, I mean, do we really have a crunch for the EVs? I mean, how many EV cars do we even have? And I'm just wondering if, if we should be putting in money for something that's like going to be there for 2 years or hopefully three or 4. I don't know.
Right. Well, like I said, to make these parking spaces for the EV station is a very small part of the cost. And so we have a EV vehicle in our fleet. I know former Officer Campo used to use it for his car, and we have employees that actually bring their EV vehicles to work. And a condition of the grant that we got from TAM is that the employees would be able to use these stations. So it was just kind of a ancillary part of this project of resurfacing. I'm like, well, why don't we remove a little bit of this curb here and probably trim the magnolia a little bit, and we could fit 2 angled parking spaces so 2 people could use the charger at the same time. So if it's just the striping cost is only a couple grand out of the whole 43 to 50 grand project. I think it's a good idea, but if I get a nay on it, we can remove that project.
Town Manager Johnson.
Hey, thank you. I understand the concerns about, why are we gonna spend money on this when the whole area is gonna be redone in a handful of years? If we decide that we don't want to do anything back there, we have to address that. It is actually the biggest rise in a public parking lot I have ever seen. We're going to have to block it off. And that's all right. I mean, I park my car there. Other people park their car there. We can move. I can park my car across the street and walk. It's just that we're going to have to make it so that people, it's not a danger to people, especially in the evening. We've installed some more lighting out there, but it's a really unpleasant situation. So that's it. I think there's so much deferred maintenance back there that and it's going to take a while. And I know that we would try to, I also recommend making these, spending this money on the parking lot. There's a lot of back and forth. I believe, Rich, part of the project is also to slightly adjust the driveway. Isn't that correct? Because the visibility coming out of the parking lot is also challenging. So it was kind of to address that issue too. And we don't know for sure what exactly is it all going to be need to be ripped out? Could be some of it that's incorporated into a new project.
Yeah.
So just wanted to make those comments.
I found the updated drawing. It went through a couple iterations. Let me share my screen real quick and we can take a look at it here. So let me make that big. So do you see that? Anything on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, you do. Okay, so, and then you can see my cursor. So here's what we're planning on doing. This is the limits of the work. The EV station is over here.
Where's Sir Francis Drake?
So Francis Drake Boulevard is right here.
And the driveway, show us the cursor where the driveway, okay, that's the driveway?
Here's the driveway currently where everybody enters. So we're not changing any
Okay.
of that. So this is here's the big redwood tree right here, Town Hall. And this is where all the damaged curb is. So we remove all the old curb and replace it with either decomposed granite or something like that. We'd reconfigure these parking, the accessible parking and the town manager parking, kind of pull it away from this area. And then we'd remove the DPW secretary parking area, kind of replace it with a picnic bench and mulch or whatever. And then here's where we would remove just a bit of curb here. And we put in this angled parking for the EV station that's right here. So we'd be able to fit 2 cars. Currently only 1 car parks parallel with the EV station. And then this area would all be repaved, all the damaged pavement areas. And that's kind of the extent of the project.
Is there an option to just, if the arborist says the roots can be cut, to just pull up the pavement by the tree, cut the roots and repave, just given that we're going to be redoing the whole area soon?
Yes, we can just limit this to fixing the pavement for accessibility and taking out that curb that's being pushed up.
What would the cost of that be?
We'd probably reduce the cost by 20 grand. So it'd be about 25. You'd go from 50 to 25. So we wouldn't do any of this paving over here at all. We wouldn't change any of this. We just fix this area up. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a possibility. Okay, so let's see, Councilmember McMillan and then Councilmember Cool.
Yeah, I guess on this document, on this diagram, I would be in favor of addressing things that aren't going to be touched during the facilities remodel, because I don't think we're tearing down or redoing town hall. So the stuff close to town hall should probably be addressed. The other stuff I think is a closer call. But like all projects, we think that this is going to be done in 3 to 4 years. I mean, who knows how long it's going to take, really. So I don't know. How's that for clarity? I'm all for
Spot on.
extending the Laurel Grove pathway beyond Canyon to Macon Grade. I think that's super, super important for everyone who lives there and for the kids and for safety. And I would suggest that Chief Pata look at further traffic calming measures, but I think he should also explore potentially having a light at Winship and Sir Francis Drake, if that is an option that would help reduce speeding and enhance safety. So I would not want that to be off the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cool.
As an old decrepit person, I think it's very important to take out that terrible surface next to that redwood tree.
Mhm.
I mean, even in the daytime, I have trouble negotiating that, and I have to be very careful. I think it's very dangerous. My second comment is, I think we have spent way too long talking about this small project when we have other things that are more important to discuss today. And I think we ought to get on with whatever else we have to discuss.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Breckus.
Yeah, I don't know where this was in the presentation, and I apologize if it was far back enough that I should have raised it earlier, but when we talk about doing a facilities, having a scoping for that, if we wanted to put housing on the site of our town facilities, is there anything that would affect that scoping or what you're going to bring to us? I can't remember. It was like June or July. I mean, is that important to decide in advance, or when you bring that scoping, could we at that point give direction on that issue?
Krista?
Mayor, thank you, Councilmember Breckus. Yeah, that's exactly one of the reasons why I want to bring the request for proposals for the consultant to do that master planning process to the council, because there are many jurisdictions that are incorporating some usually workforce housing or something, small, even really could be getting to, 1 or 2 units is going to help us meet our RENA numbers. So that's one of the reasons why. And so we're looking to bring this to you at your very next meeting in April. Can I make just one short little comment about the charging stations too? It's my understanding that there has been an interest amongst the council to try to electrify more of our city-owned vehicles as town-owned vehicles through the upcoming years. And so we have to replace a police department utility vehicle, and Chief Pata is looking into purchasing an electric one, which is going to need to be charged. And so I just want to check in, Rich, right now I think Chief Pata spoke with you, Rich, about that. Would that, if the council, the council would have to approve the purchase of the vehicle, would that vehicle have to be charged at this station, Rich?
It wouldn't have to be, but it would be there if he wanted to. Now he wants to purchase a truck too, which is a little bit bigger than a compact. So if we're going to go that route, I might need to, there's room to widen one of the spaces, and we can do that, change it to a standard stall. But yeah, it's a good point. So then we'd have 2 cars in our fleet, and but only 1 nominal parking stall, unless we do, we remove some of this curb up by the police station and add this angled parking. And like what Julie said is a great point, is like, yeah, it could happen in 4 years, could happen in 5 years, things could happen. Similar to my decisions of drainage around the Winship Bridge, I got tired of waiting for that project to happen, and I had to move forward with like the flap gate and things like that. So we need to make these types of decisions to not continually defer these improvements, thinking that a project's around the corner. So that's another reason why I did pursue the preliminary engineering on this, to get I think it's a good project for the town.
I think overall, there's certainly support for the Fernhill sidewalk, for the Laurel Grove extension, for enforcement on Sir Francis Drake, plus minus a stoplight. That's in differences of opinion. The town hall, at least part of it, if not all of it, and looking into a roundabout. I mean, I think Shady Lane, Lagunitas. I'm not so sure about downtown, because people really do have the ability to make U-turns if they would just go through the post office. But I mean, I think most of those projects, Rich, I think there is pretty good, consensus that these are all good projects to move forward on.
Right.
Is there more discussion that we should have, or more direction that we should offer, Krista or Rich or council members? Councilmember Breckus.
I just want to make sure that saying we want to explore it means the items will come back to council, correct? It's not like Rich is just unilaterally going to put, for example, a stoplight in Winship without having a discussion that involves community members.
Yeah, the only current project is this town hall parking thing. The rest of them would require more vetting through the town council.
Okay. Okay, and we're sort of vague about the town hall project. Are we just going to pass and say, okay? Councilmember McMillan?
I was just going to ask about a roundabout. Rich, do you have any idea how much let's say we just do one roundabout at Shady Lane and Lagunitas. Do you have any idea how much that would cost? Rough guess?
Rough guess would be between 300 and 500,000.
Whoa.
Okay, I'm a no on the roundabout.
We did look at it once and we passed, and maybe it was a cost issue. Well, I guess it could sit another year and we could see where we are in a year. I mean, we have enough other projects.
I can get an actual estimate done on it for not too much.
And can we use, I mean, we already looked at it, so can't we resurrect some of those, those plans?
Yeah, I have the plan. I can send it off to Mo and get an estimate.
I see. Okay. So Town Manager Johnson.
Well, to address the council's interest in the parking lot project, Rich, is it feasible for us to bring it back to the council at the next meeting we're estimating it's below the town manager's authority, but that doesn't mean I can't bring it back to the council to have your, get your approval of it. Rich, how would that work? Or Julie's shaking her head.
I think you should make the decision, Krista. You've received input from all of us. I don't know.
It's not a huge, I mean, we're sort of reluctant to pay money when we were going to have to pay it again, but it sounds like we're not going to be remodeling for a while, and these having extra space for charging and certainly the safety issue, those are huge. And those redwood roots are going to have to be dealt with when we remodel anyway, so.
Okay, well, Rich and I, thank you. So Rich and I can look at it. Maybe we can figure out how to get the cost down, Rich.
Okay, Councilmember Breckus.
I was
you
just
done?
saying,
Okay.
I'm fine.
Okay, then let's move on to the next item, which is, so this is item number 8 on, thank you very much, Rich. That was very helpful. Item 8, discussion of town goals and items related to fiscal year 2022-23.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my screen, just a moment. Okay, so draft priorities. Okay, so staff has developed this initial list of potential new or one-time projects to be included in next year's budget for this is for council to consider. We'd like to hear input from the council regarding these projects, or if there are others that are missing, other things that you'd like us to explore and bring back for further consideration by the council. So because, let's see, just a time check, 12:03, we just have about a half an hour left. So instead of asking staff to talk about each one of these things, I'm just going to go through them real quickly. We do have our staff team here, so if council has additional questions, we can certainly bring them on to talk about them. So the first item is continuing to implement those emergency preparedness policies and practices. Examples are that vegetation management that has been underway, defensible space evaluations, public education awareness, Ross Ready, evacuation routes, maps, and enhancements. So luckily for us, we do have some significant help from Ross Valley Fire Department and from Marin Wildfire Authority. And I'm very aware that this is an interest of not just the council, but members of the community and us as staff. So we'll be working on that in the upcoming year. Preparing that town facilities master plan. This is the RFP I would be bringing back to you at your next meeting. Developing a facilities financing plan. So this is, as Councilmember McMillan mentioned earlier in your workshop this morning, that there quite a, the council has some different options and some different strategies and timing and all that. And if you see here on the slide, I think it would be worthwhile for the council to appoint a subcommittee to work with me on exploring those ideas. I mean, the council certainly knows better than I the community and the history of ballot measures and what the community has supported or has been concerned about. There are some options for us. So I think that's something we can be doing concurrently with the development of the facilities master plan. Because these ballot, if the council does want to go to the voters, we need to be preparing for such ballot measures. You heard about the 6-cycle housing element update. That is a significant work product for, especially for the community development department. But as we looked at the capacity, significant work for the town council and for the community and other city staff. So that's really an emphasis for the coming year. One of the other items I've added here is a focus on improving the town organization's cybersecurity. I think a majority of the council members attended a I'm having trouble with these acronyms. I think it was the January meeting where they had a couple of really excellent speakers were talking about cybersecurity, and we do have some resources. Chief Pata has been leading up our effort here, and so the town we contract with Marin IT for our IT services, and they certainly provide levels of cybersecurity and are a resource for us. But there's some other things that we need to be doing. The County of Marin has a really helpful staff person, Jason Balderrama, who just last week published for a county region working group on cybersecurity. He published a really nice 10 tips for success, or 10 things that cities and towns in Marin County should be focusing on the coming year. And examples of them are installing multi-factor authentication, making sure that we have a comprehensive cybersecurity awareness and training for staff, hardening our email security, doing a vulnerability assessment, a security incident response. And so those are a couple of examples of items that we really need to be focusing on the coming year. And so this is a staff effort. It's going to involve my time, Chief Pata's time, other staff time. Luckily, we've got Marin IT that can be helpful to us. Some of these items might not be significant costs to us, and some of them might be. So we are just starting this this process, but I have put it on it as a priority for the coming year for staff resources. Focus on pedestrian safety, education, enforcement, engineering. You all have talked a lot about that, but that would be a priority for the coming year. Continuing to increase outreach and community engagement, especially with public safety. Chief Pata has made a lot of progress in this area. And as you saw in the housing element presentation earlier this morning, that's a significant component of that project. In addition to this list from last year that I've put on here is, I have a priority of employee retention and recruitment. We have had several vacancies where they're difficult to fill. We are competing with other towns and cities in Marin County and Sonoma County. And so I need to be focused on this. So in the coming year, and it could very well require additional consulting resources or staff time. And it's something I'm going to continue to evaluate and bring forward for additional appropriation as needed. There's only 2 slides, don't worry. The second slide is this is a carryover from last year, a new cell tower to locate, extending the leases of the cell tower and the cell apparatus that's here on the fire station it's on the municipal, the public works building. So that all needs to be looked at. Oftentimes we have cell phone companies, telecommunication companies that work for telecommunication companies that want to renegotiate and extend and add leases. And so I've asked our interim planning and building director, David Woltering, to kind of help me figure out what do we have, what needs to be done, especially considering that that facility may likely not be in a different format in a few years. So planning and building needs to bring to council for adoption the 2023 building code. So that'll be happening this fall. We need to be doing follow-up for our SB 9 ordinance. So that is a work project for the planning and building department. Updating records retention policy and increasing our document scanning. This is for the town clerk and the town manager's office. It's not flashy, but it's very important, and it's something that needs to be done. There's a increasing number of public records requests, and we are required to be responsive and be able to produce documents in a reasonable amount of time for people that are requesting them. And it can be challenging to do here, the way that the records have been stored. Climate action plan update. We can provide more information from that as needed, but it's my understanding it dates from 2010 and it needs to be updated. Senate Bill 1383 is the organics recycling. Now that you've got this ordinance in place, we need to implement it, and the state law requires quite a bit of reporting. So I'll need to be focused on that this coming year. We'd like to continue the two major town events, the town dinner and the 4th of July. And then Chief Pata is interested in participating in the National Night Out event, which takes place in early August. And he can provide more information about that in the future, or today, if you'd like. One of the things Mayor Robbins had asked me a few days ago is an estimate of how much these two town events cost. And I have that for you. Gretchen provided the information to me. Roughly, it's about $20,000 for both events. So, and that, so the town dinner costs between staff costs, and that's really overtime for staff and that need to be involved in it, and supplies. That event totals just under $18,000. However, last year, the town received about $5,000 in revenue from tickets purchased. So that's just about $12,500 for the town dinner. And then the July 4th event costs between staff overtime costs, supplies. We do not receive revenue for that event. That total is just under $8,000. So it's just a little bit under $20,000 for both of those events. And then finally, a priority for the upcoming year would be to implement age-friendly task force recommendations and the RPOA events, but of course, per town council discussion. I included in your agenda packet last Friday two correspondence, or one staff report regarding the age-friendly task force and correspondence from RPOA about their requests for funding, and we're happy to provide information about that and just get your direction on how you want to see funding levels or staff levels for those events. And so we're back to the draft priorities. I think we covered capital funding, but I'm looking at council priorities, discussion on these last two slides. I could put the slides back up again. If you'd like to talk about them or have questions about them or additions.
Let's see, Councilmember McMillan.
I think it's great to consider having a subcommittee to explore various options for the facility financing. I think in light of the experience that we all had with the Branson CUP, we might have been better served by having a subcommittee give guidance to the staff rather than waiting and having it all come before the council at once. And I know there's been reluctance to use subcommittees in the past because we are such a small jurisdiction and we all are very interested and committed and we want to hear what's going on. But I think for certain issues, it makes a lot of sense to have a subcommittee. So I fully support that.
Thank you. Councilmember Cool.
I have a question for Krista, which is, how does the council get involved in employee retention and recruitment?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Cool. The role of the council is to, I could very well have to come forward. Well, first of all, the police MOU is something that the council will be providing negotiating parameters for me and our attorney who's going to be working on that. And ultimately, the council will be approving the memorandum of understanding on the agenda in the open session. But the council also approves in your annual budget process salary resolutions. You are asked to approve a annual cost of living increase to salaries. So you are asked through our budget process, you are asked to approve funding that we use for employee training. One of the things I just mentioned was cybersecurity, which is actually pretty low cost programs that are available for city employees to be able to be reminded and to increase awareness of phishing and other kinds of attempts to invade, attack our system. And as for recruitment, in some cases, so I guess it's really the council supporting through the budget process or in between your annual budget process. If I need to come back, if I'm having trouble recruiting for a particular position, and we do everything that we can internally to recruit for a position, there may be a time when we need some extra expertise. And so we need to ask for a consultant to help us do targeted recruitments. So it's things like that, that as it becomes harder and harder to attract employees. Another thing, and I'm brainstorming here, but another thing is employees are expecting and to have flexible work schedules. And as we are able, and as we found in COVID with technology, we were able to continue to provide operations, and some employees are able to do that from home. Not all employees can, certainly not. But having the council's support that as an employer nowadays, especially in a region where employees can very rarely afford to live close by, in order to be competitive in the market, we need to be able to provide flexibility and the ability to work from home certain parts of the day. So having the council's support, and because we're so small, that might result in different office hours for town hall. It might result in the need for different kinds of technology that could actually be a win for employees, the organization, and the community if we continue to strive to make it easier for people to do their business without coming into City Hall. Does that answer your question, Mayor Pro Tem?
I think so, but it makes it clear to me that this is an item for which we need to look to your leadership about what's specifically needed. I don't want to see the policeman patrolling from home, but we certainly should encourage employees to work from home where that's reasonable. Thanks very much.
So Councilmember Breckus, and then I'd like to, after that, just offer some comments about the two things that we were sent in our packets, the age-friendly goals and the RPOA projects. Councilmember Breckus.
Well, I was understanding that the subcommittee that we were talking about was really just the financing piece of it, as opposed to here's two people and they just, give direction to staff on what we want for the facilities generally.
That's how I saw it also, that it's sort of like getting ready to do a bond or a parcel tax or something.
And so if that's the case, I think that could be a good idea. I know Julie and I aren't in the finance committee, and I don't think we've met during COVID. So, I don't mean to shirk that responsibility, but if somebody felt, I've never done a bond, I've never been involved in that financing, so I just don't have that knowledge. I'd be happy to try and bone up, but I do just want to say we could do it through the finance committee, or we could look to people who have more knowledge and experience than I to help with this.
Yeah, I'd be happy to help. I mean, Julie and I both have done, ballot measures a lot. So I think, certainly there'll be enough, there's an interest. I'm sure we could find two people who'd be happy to do it. And I think you're right, Elizabeth. It's not policy. It's more sort of implementing what we've already decided. How do we get the money once we've decided as a group how we're going to get it? Then we go out and put something on the ballot.
Well, and there's alternative things that we could explore that we haven't yet considered, like a transfer tax, or increasing the transfer tax. And it entails a lot of other legal things that we would have to do. But long-term, it may be beneficial not only to help fund the facilities, but also to provide additional revenue to the town on a longer-term basis. So yeah, that's all I'll say.
So in the packets, we had two requests. So one was the age-friendly goals. And if you look at it, there was a request for $8,000 for us to put into our budget, $8,000 for the year, $5,000 for event costs, $2,000 for brochures, $1,000 for special mailings. My personal take on that was, gee, $5,000 for event costs. I'm not totally sure about that, because I'm thinking that these are wonderful events, but these are with older people who generally have pretty good funds, or if they don't have great funds, they at least have minimal property taxes. And so I think that, and there certainly has been an interest and a willingness at the events for those people to help, to sponsor and pay for them. So I don't know if we need $5,000, but, maybe some smaller amount to offset, some of it. I mean, it's certainly a worthy project, but we have to decide, how many of the worthy projects are funded by the groups themselves, like Ross Rec is funded, those sports programs are funded by the participants, and how much should the town fund? So, I mean, my first take on that was, I don't know about 5,000 for the events, but everything else seems okay. Other thoughts by other council members? Or Krista, your thoughts?
Hi, I can speak. I've been losing my voice, so I apologize in advance. So yeah, I was really looking for, I'm the representative for the age-friendly task force, and I've been working with them for the past year or so, and it's been a pleasure. So I was mostly just looking for direction from the council on what funds you would like to see go that direction. And we are doing a breakfast coming up that we are gonna this time charge $10 a person and see how that goes. That'll be kind of a good litmus test, I guess, for seeing how, if it changes participation, if it doesn't change participation, and that's in April. So that'll be good to have that happen. And I think people are willing to contribute. So there is that option there. And we're looking at doing maybe a town hall or two over at Marin Art and Garden Center. And they've actually been very willing to not charge rent for us and just have us pay for the labor, which breaks down to about $5 a person. And RPOA has also helped split that cost. So there are definitely areas for figuring out getting different funds either contributed from the residents or from RPOA or things like that. So I definitely appreciate your feedback and where you see things should either be changed a little bit or not, and make those adjustments.
Councilmember McMillan, and then Councilmember Cool.
Well, I was just thinking that, as people get older, they have some people have more money. Maybe some Ross residents would be willing to make a donation to the town to establish an endowment to kick off funds to help pay for age-friendly Ross going forward. It's something that we could keep in the back of our mind and maybe explore. And then the hit to the town budget would be more minimal.
Councilmember Cool.
Well, we don't know how much of our population are older and aren't capable of spending. And until we find that out, I think we've got to put some seed money into this so we can try and find out are there old people who need help? And if so, provide some help to get them into activities that will help improve their lives. And I also disagree with the idea that there's a lot of people who have a lot more money as they get older. Thank you.
Krista, do you think, are we expected to kind of come up with a money amount for each of these items? I mean, we will just discuss each one a little bit more and kind of come up with some direction. Is that kind of what we should be doing today?
Yeah, I mean, we'd like direction because I don't think we've included, I think anything with age friendly, Gretchen can correct me if I'm wrong, has just been, we've just kind of found out what we can in our budget.
Yeah,
And,
it hasn't been a substantial amount of money because it's just been the few breakfasts and a lot of it's been split with RPOA. So I've just been able to use money that I have in my budget for this fiscal year to support that. But as we come out of COVID, we're feeling a little better about getting people together and things like that. So we just looking towards next fiscal year, hoping to be able to do a few more things with more people. And there is that fine line of trying, you don't want to discourage anybody from coming to these that, especially like a disaster preparedness type of thing by putting a price on it. But at the same time, does the town want to fund, so we were talking about doing a donation type of thing, like where you could donate if you could come to, or if not, you don't have to, but I don't know how that could be tricky as well. So, but I think if we kept the price at, a reasonable amount, like $10, it's not too discouraging for people. And I think if you do think 5,000 is too high for that, I can find spaces to lower it. So that's definitely an option.
Well, I do agree. I mean, for things like safety, disaster preparedness, I mean, the town absolutely should be paying to move those programs forward. I was just thinking with the breakfast and the social events, they're really desirable and they're really well attended. But I think you probably could say, suggested donation, $25, not required. And you have a way that they can just click and put it on their credit card or not, but they sign up and they can either add money at the time they sign up or not. And you can see how things go. And my guess is most people are able and more than willing to pay the $25, and those who can't, it doesn't show, they just, you sort of do it at the time that you register online and then you're all set. So I would propose something like that so that the social events are kind of programs that probably could pay for themselves, but the safety events, that's really it's really the town's job to pay for.
Thank you for that direction.
Councilmember McMillan.
I'm getting old and I don't have any money. So I think $10 seems more reasonable than 25.
Well, then still should be optional. I mean,
Yeah,
because we
I
don't
think
want to exclude people.
I like characterizing it as an optional donation, and I like having people do it when they sign up so that they're not embarrassed to do it, like pass around the hat. I think that's great. Thank you.
Councilmember Breckus.
Sorry, I agree completely. I do think that it's, for a pilot program to be subsidized by the town, and it's one of our goals and what we want to achieve here, it's a good idea. And if it seems like it's something else can be proposed sometime in the future, but I think to get it off the ground, we should try and subsidize it in some way.
So are you saying that you're okay to just subsidize the amount of $8,000 for the first year or something
I could be fine with that. I also liked what, Julie said about it being like $10 and you don't have to pay it if you don't want to, and you're not embarrassed by that or what have you, because I actually always believe that in Ross, there's a perception that people have a lot more money than there are. And really, some really, really do. Some don't. We have 33% of renters in this community, which is a surprising figure. But I mean, when I look at how many people launch their kid out of 8th grade and then move, that tells me that a lot of people can't afford this community into the future. So
So should we say, instead of 8, 6 or 7? I mean, where are we on this? What do people think? Or 8, let's say 6, 7 or 8. I don't think anyone wants to go lower than that. How do we decide? It's kind of arbitrary. What do you think you could live with, Gretchen? Oh, Beach is saying, sorry, what are you saying, Beach? Raise your finger. Beach is saying 8. You've got 8. We've got 2 for 8. Julie?
Let's do 8 for the first year. I think Elizabeth makes a really good point about it being a pilot, and then we can
Okay.
revisit
Fine.
next year.
Okay, done. All right. Thank you, Gretchen. And thank you for all the programs which are very well, attended. So RPOA. So RPOA also has proposals to split their events with the town funding. And I think what's interesting about this is that it sort of is a little bit of a shift in how we work with RPOA. So in the past, RPOA has funded kind of amenities and decorations, ways to beautify the town. So the banners and the hanging flowers and holiday decorations. But more recently, RPOA has had some infrastructure projects like enclosures for the porta potties and the drinking fountain. The town's contributed to some of these. And then even more recently, RPOA has added to the events that are already existing, townwide events with their gatherings in the common, and these have been well received. I think it might help as a starting point to clarify where what should the town be paying for and what should Ross Rec be paying for, and is it the historic split was Ross Rec would do decorations and amenities and the town would do infrastructure. But these new projects have been well attended, though some are kind of expensive. The estimate for the coming Christmas one or holiday one is $32,000. But the Ross Rec is asking, can the town help sponsor some of these events also, which is different from infrastructure. So I don't, I'm not sure how the town should go about this. The Ross Rec, the RPOA project events are numerous, but very popular. I mean, maybe we clarify a little bit that in general, RPOA pays for enhancements and the town pays for infrastructure. That's a pretty clear, simple kind of breakdown of responsibility. But then perhaps the town helps at least with some of these events, because there is the town goal of strengthening community involvement. So, there could be anywhere from thinking that these events should be self-funded and the town shouldn't have any role, to funding part of them as part of the goal, strengthening community involvement, to paying or contributing the full amount that RPOA is asking, which is $26,000 for the year. So I think there are a number of ways to think about it. And Jeff Koblik sent a letter, kind of summarizing the projects. What do people think about how the town should address this request for a budget item? It certainly makes great sense to address it not early, but address it in advance as a budget item instead of, in the past, there weren't events, so it didn't really come up. But in the past year, with these newer events, I think they were addressed one at a time with Joe, and it got very unclear, like who's paying for what and why. So I think that this process is great. I'm just not sure how we, how people think about what should the town pay for. But, do keep in mind, we do have that goal of strengthening community involvement. So who's got thoughts or comments about the project? And you have the proposal in front of you that they're anticipating spending. It's $76,000 for the year, with the town spending $26,500. Councilmember Kircher.
I think these events are important and significant, so I would be in favor of the town contributing.
Councilmember Breckus.
the RPOA merged with the auxiliary.
Yes.
And, you know, I mean, it was many moons ago when I was on the auxiliary, but I thought the auxiliary raised a lot more money than the 50 grand. Like I just signed up for that dinner, the holiday dinner thing. And like that event alone, I thought usually raised at least 100 grand. And I'm just curious about this. I don't mean to be suspicious of it because I'm sure Jeff knows what he's talking about, but I'm just curious about it. What is the story with that budget? Are they doing other things with the money they're raising?
I mean that this is just the budget for these specific events, but there's other money that's raised that, okay.
Well, and maybe it's over a 2-year span. They don't do the holiday dinner every year or something. I'm just not sure, but I guess I was just wondering then, is there a way for us to understand what historically we have donated for these events so we can understand what, I don't see that in the report or in Jeff's letter. What have we been paying historically so we know what the ask is?
So I think we've been paying something for the Christmas lights, but not the other events because they're new events. And then as Krista said, we've paid for the 4th of July and the town dinner. Krista, can you help answer that question?
Thank you. And I might ask Gretchen to chime in, but it's my understanding that the town used to have a tree that the town had lights on that they kind of kept up there year round. And that it was not that long ago when RPOA asked for additional town funding of a enhanced lighting plan, and that the town did not participate in that. That's my understanding.
I think that was just this year.
Okay, so just this past year, in regards to, and it's also my understanding that there, and then I can ask Gretchen to too, but I think this past year, the former town manager did agree to contribute a certain amount of funding to the band, to pay for the band or partially pay for the band at some of the events that occurred last year. And that's kind of a continuation of that. I did not see when I was looking at the budget that that was a item that actually went to the council specifically. I think, you know, the council approves the entire budget, and it's my understanding that the former town manager found the money in the budget, but that the council didn't specifically give approval for it. And that's why I'm seeking, because I want to make sure that if I'm signing a check for something that the council understands, especially to outside organizations, that the council understands and is approving it. So if this, it sounds like it was well received and maybe it was a pilot program last year. So if the council is interested in doing it, then that's what I'm looking for. Let me just touch base with, I know that for, you know, the auxiliary is planning on doing their spring fling event in a couple of weeks, and they got a permit from the town, but they're not asking the town for any funding for that event, nor are they asking for the town to provide any staff support. And staff support is really having a maintenance staff person there and having the police department. So, but that's just a couple hours in the morning. But the events that are in the evening or that require power or lighting or any of these live on the common events would require some staff support, and it's not outrageous. And I would like, if we have to pay overtime if it's held on the weekend for a maintenance staff person to be present, to have that person focus on the town's infrastructure, which is, you know, the ability to power up, lighting in case the sprinklers go off in the middle of the event, you know, that kind of stuff. And then of course, we would need to have some amount of police presence, especially because it seems like there's an interest of these groups to have alcohol at the events. And Chief Pata is available to speak further than that. Gretchen, is there any other staff, and Gretchen does spend a certain amount of time coordinating it or flexing her schedule so that she can come in on the day of the event and and coordinate, open up the Ross Rec rooms to allow the, so she's very supportive of it. So she spends time. Am I forgetting anything, Gretchen?
So
Oh, there
so
she is.
here I am. For the last Live on the Common, it was 2 nights, and we've realized that was too much. But for each night, we split the cost of the band, which was $1,500 for. It was $3,000 total for each band, so we split that, and the town paid $3,000, $1,500 to each band. So that's that's the number that they're showing for their upcoming concert events. Just a little to go back quickly, the history is basically we started with the outdoor dining, closing down Redwood, and we used, I believe, Rich and the TAM grant funding to get those tables and everything to support the local restaurant. So that's how it started, as this little seed during COVID to try to help to get people to come out and that couldn't get to eat inside restaurants and stuff. And then it kind of grew. We got someone playing music on the Common, and then it grew into this whole Live on the Common event. So that's also, since I've been partnering with them to put on these events, that, oh, sorry. Hold on. There we go. Just the direction on, is this the direction that the council wants to see these events? If so, I'm more than happy to work with them on it, just because it started out as something and it's gone to somewhere else. So for me, it's just kind of seeing what your guys' vision is for the town and how I can support that.
So council member, how about McMillan, Breckus, and then Cool?
So I think Gretchen put it well. I think we need to decide if we are an event planning business or if we provide infrastructure. I would also note that we just had a discussion that we pay $20,000 a year to do the 4th of July and the town dinner. And those two community building events are not reflected on this budget. And I think perhaps they should be, so that people are fully aware that the town is already spending an additional $20,000 for 2 community building events. And I just wanted to say also to Elizabeth Breckus's point about the Ross Auxiliary, when I was on the auxiliary, there was a phone book that was produced every other year, and it generated about $100,000 in revenue. And the winter dinner generates about $50,000 to $60,000 a year. So since they went to an online phone book, I know their revenue has gone down significantly because of the lack of that phone book with all the advertising.
So just to really quickly, those 2 events are under the special events and activities under in the recreation budget. Maybe it should be made more clear in the budget when you.
So Gretchen, you just froze. I think you're
Oh.
back with us. So we heard that maybe it should be
Sorry.
more clear in the budget, but we didn't really hear the rest of it.
I just said that those 2 events, the town dinner and the 4th of July, they live on the line item of special events and activities in the recreation budget.
Uh-huh.
So maybe if we were to break it out
Well,
more
we should
clearly
be
so
done
people could
shortly,
see
but
that those are the
who
2
knows?
events in there. But just wanted you to know that's where they are.
Yeah, or maybe RPOA and the auxiliary want to share in the cost of those 2 events, so we're all sharing more equivalently.
Yeah. Councilmember Breckus and then Councilmember Cool.
I actually feel like I'm fine with these expenses. I do think that we might have to say that this is like, we're testing the waters with this arrangement. Because, what I was concerned about is what control do we have over how it gets planned, and do we want, what if RPOA, it's always worked really well where they come and say, we'd like to do this. And then everyone's like, that's a good idea. But it's been kind of like recreation. Generally, everybody's just throwing things against the wall, and oftentimes there's some good ideas that get created out of it. So, maybe we have to just put it like that to them and just say, this is kind of a new way of envisioning things. And so we're willing to try it, but, there could be some issues of how we partner, whether we are in total agreement of how the events happen. So just maybe, pilot thing, we just try it out to see if there's a problem. I mean, Tiburon shuts down the street and the whole, I think there is a lot of benefits to some of this because I think it does help the businesses. I think it does offer things for the kids. So I think it does fit within a lot of our ideas to our goals to do this stuff. But a part of me, when I saw it, was kind of thinking it was a little bit of a weird arrangement, but maybe it's not that weird. And maybe, it's just an extension of what we've done. So that was my thought.
Councilmember Cool.
Well, I think that the RPOA and the Ross Auxiliary are much to be complimented for what they have developed over the last 6 or 8 years. When I first got on the council and the first time I was mayor and started going to RPOA meetings, what they were doing was mostly beautification things, as our mayor has mentioned. As time has gone on, they have gotten more and more involved in more and more things about the town. And I think that their development has been great for the town. That said, I have some concerns about the extent to which the town ought to be participating in what I would call, perhaps somewhat crudely, social events. Because as our mayor has pointed out today and in the past, our real purpose is to support town activities such as police and fire protection and physical things, developing physical things as we go along. So I guess where I'm sort of going windily is I'd be inclined to go along with this budget request for this year, understanding that it's not set in concrete that we would continue to do this sort of thing every year in the future. I'd like to see us try it out. I'd like to see how it works. I recognize that we had many hundreds of people at those events last summer, and that's great. That's a large part of the town. So I don't think we can worry about people saying, well, you're wasting money on things I'm not interested in, because I think they do have a function in developing community spirit, which is important. But I'm not sure how far the town ought to get into developing community spirit. So I would be inclined to approve it this year with the understanding that we're going to have to look at it again next year to see what part, if any, of these social programs we want to continue to support. Thank you.
Are there other comments?
I'm fine approving it for this year and then revisiting next year. Let's see how it goes, have more transparency. But I do think that the 4th of July and the town dinner should be on there so that the town's getting credit for those 2 events.
Well, maybe we could clarify, anytime it's co-sponsored that, everyone who's sponsoring RPOA, auxiliary, and the town would get credit. I think that would, are you saying, Julie, the town doesn't get credit for sponsoring those 2 events?
Yeah, if you look at this list, the town dinner and the 4th of July are community building events. They don't appear on this list at all. Maybe there's an opportunity to ask RPOA for help in those two events. I mean, if we're going to morph and support them in their events, I think maybe they should support us in our events, and we can all be, you know, one big event planning, community building spirit team.
In a way that starts to get so confusing though. I mean, I was going to say, shouldn't we at least try to clarify that we do infrastructure, they do beautification, and we help out with the community events because, at least for now, to see how they go. But that would mean that we don't necessarily pay for the flowers and the banners, because that's what Ross RPO has always done. But indeed, we jump in and support the live events because we think of them as community building events, as people are saying, for this year, and then see where we are next year. I don't know if I agree, Julie, about adding them. I mean, they're not on this list because RPO is not asking for any money for those. RPO is not putting those on, and they're not contributing any money. So they're kind of separate. I mean, I guess I see at some point all the events will be all blurred into one, but I don't know if I'd blur them in this year. I don't know.
I think the normal citizen has no idea who's doing what for what event, you know, and I think we should just have a list of all the events and who's paying for them. And maybe there's an opportunity to have the RPOA group, if we're going to pay for some of their events, maybe they should pay for some of our events. And it's all one town. We're all in this together. You know, I don't know.
Want to comment, you know, there's a live on the common on 10/14. That's just 2 weeks after the town dinner. Is that, I mean, that RPOA is proposing that, but it seems like too much, but I don't know if I'm the one to suggest that or not. I don't know. Councilmember Breckus.
I was just going to say, I see 2 hands raised in our attendees.
So let's see. Let's bring them in.
Well, we did public comment at the beginning, and that was the arrangement. Do we want to change that?
You know, why don't we give them each 3 minutes, because I think it could be helpful to just clarify where we go with this. I mean, in the spirit of working together, I think we should probably just, you know, not just have a 3-minute comment for each one.
Go ahead, Adrian.
I'm Adrienne Liggett. I'm co-president of Ross Auxiliary, and I'm on the board of RPOA. I just wanted to clarify some budget items with the mobile directory. We get about $4,000 to $5,000 from our mobile directory every year. And sadly, the spring dinner, or formerly the winter dinner, brings in, that 2 years ago, it only brought in $12,000. So our budget has dropped significantly. We're hoping to bring an auction format back. The funds that we are planning to raise from this year will go towards Ross Common beautification. I understand we'll be doing repaving, but looking how we can help to partner with the town to do a bocce court or improved plantings around the common. But the funds are trying not to go back into the events, but rather to partner with RPOA to beautify the town. So I just wanted to clarify our budget and what we're intending to do with that, with the funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. And there was one other person, Linda?
Yes, there's someone on the phone.
Okay.
So go ahead. The number ending in 8586.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Hi. Hi, how are
Elena.
you? Thank you. Yes, hi again. The other co-president of the Ross Auxiliary and also on the board of the Ross Property Owners Association. I've been listening, and so I've just kind of wanted to clarify also a few things. And Adrian and I we're not together yet, we're texting, and you know, I think our main thing, as you've seen, is bringing community together and also using the infrastructure that's already in place. So we have a beautiful stage, we have, you know, this grass area, and it's like, you know, in a way of we beautify the town, but then let's use it as well and make sure everybody can have access to it. I'd say the live on the common, the comments that we got from people was that it was so amazing for multi-generations to meet. So, you know, people haven't seen each other in so long, and like, you know, an old friend, you know, I just feel like it shouldn't just be seen as like for families or auxiliary members, or, you know, it is that I think would fall under age friendly as well, in a way to improve the lifestyle of everyone in town, not just, you know, the younger generations. And then, yeah, and I think, you know, with we've received feedback that the town dinners is so cold and you're sitting down and it's too formal. And so that's kind of what also motivated us to do the live on the Commons. And we'd be more than happy to help and be a partner, just like, you know, Gretchen's helped us, Anthony's helped us. Like, we are all in into bringing the community together and making Ross just a more friendly and integrated community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, it seems like we have a consensus that we're okay to go ahead with this year. Oh, sorry, Town Manager Johnson, your hand is up.
I'm gonna be either bold or silly, but based on Elena's comment just now and the mayor's comment that the dinner and the event are so close together in October, does the council want to consider not doing the event this year, not doing the dinner?
I think
Throw
we're
it out
better
there.
off, I think we're better off doing the dinner and then deciding, do we need a second event, and let our POA decide that they want an event 2 weeks after. And if they go ahead with it and it's too close, or, you know, kind of cannibalizes the Rosstown dinner, you know, attendance, maybe we reconsider next year. But I might just leave everything as planned, go ahead, and then we see how it goes this year, and we can reconsider next year.
Okay.
Is that the consensus? Councilmember McMillan?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think people can self-select which events they want to go to. I think we also, we have a lot of stuff coming up in terms of renewing the parcel tax and a potential bond and for facilities. And I think people are really excited to get back into live events and see each other. So I think we should be capitalizing on the opportunity to build goodwill among the town residents and build community.
Okay, so I think, Krista, that settles it. We are fine with both Gretchen's request and the RPOA request, having, you know, discussed, dissected, deliberated, and the consensus is absolutely, let's go ahead, having looked at it from all sides. I think that's great. Now I think now we're at the wrap up. Is that correct, Krista?
Yes, and so I thank you for your time, the significant amount of time you devoted to this morning. So we'll be taking this input that we've received from you and coming back. You do have a special budget workshop on April 28th, I believe, also starting at 9 a.m. And it's you'll be receiving your draft budget document for that meeting. I'll probably try to incorporate a little bit more from our staff management team to be able to speak to you a little bit more than I was able to today. And I think that's it. I think I've got a lot of good feedback from you. Thank you so much.
Well, Krista, thank you. I think this was very helpful. I think we all learned a lot. I think it was a helpful time to discuss. I mean, I think we had time to discuss, which we haven't always had in the past. We've sometimes, I don't know, just haven't had as much of an opportunity to discuss some of the topics. So I think this went really well. And thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And we're pretty close to the time we wanted to end at 12:30, and it's not yet 1, almost, but right, not yet 1, 12:59. So we'll adjourn the meeting now at 12:59. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.